Thank you for coming along. Welcome. I hope you have a good time. Please eat, drink, and be merry. Not too merry while the speakers are on. Hold it till between times. Lash out. Behave yourselves while the speakers are there. Lash out again. Go for your life. Can I ask you to turn your mobiles off, please? I've done it. I was sitting in a meeting last night having thought, I've got it. Off it went. Could I thank firstly the people who are here working with us tonight. Ingrid Thompson, who's going to be first off, and then the teams from Provision, from iCare Plus, IQ, and Young Optometrists, and Paul McKinley from Optometry Finance Australia, who'll be with us as well. They're the people who are going to make this, hopefully, a really good evening for you. I hope you really enjoy it. Tonight is about options for independent private practice. We are not talking about other options that are out there, such as Georgia Matilda, Specsavers, Luxottica, that sort of thing. That may come next year. We haven't got to that. Not to say that's not for you. It's simply not the focus of the evening. Tonight is all about giving you some ideas about how you might go about getting into a genuinely independent practice, not affiliated with another group. So that's just tonight. We haven't ignored the others. It's just not the focus of the evening. A few mechanics, if we could. If you're looking for the toilets, go straight out the door where Mark's standing, straight to the back wall, right and left. The food is out until about 7:30, so once Ingrid finishes, we'll have a short break before Steve starts. You can top up. There's really good looking desserts out there which you can grab, and come back to the tables. Waiters will be going around during the evening, but if you're just dying for another drink, you know where the bar is. It's that way. As we go, we'll ask questions as we go. Hopefully we'll be right for time, but we'll keep it to time because it will run. It's quite late as it is, so we will stay fairly strictly to time. If we're struggling with time, we'll cut the questions and do them at the end, so that will work out. Okay, a couple of other things. I'm just going to send around a list which has got your name on it. Just tick it. Just no reason other than we know that you're here. Just gives us an idea of who turned up. Ingrid has very generously given each of you, which you'll be getting, a copy of her new book. So you want to start a business? She'll be talking about some of the principles that are espoused in this. We'll give these to you later on. They are a rare thing, and Ingrid will explain to you why they're a rare thing. And so, Andrew, get on with it. Let me introduce Ingrid Thompson. Ingrid's role in life is to help people start and grow businesses. She's been 15 years as a business coach, mostly with health professionals. Prior to this role, she's worked in training and management accounting for Qantas and CSR, so some big and very successful organisations. Ingrid loves to take the complex and make it simple, which is what she's done with the book and what you'll be able to read again later on. I first met Ingrid a few months ago on the recommendation of one of our colleagues who was talking to me about how to help people get into practices. So, as we talked, we came up with the idea of, am I cut out for this? The things you need to consider when looking at starting a business. Please welcome Ingrid Thompson.
That's lovely, welcome. So thanks everybody for taking the time on a Wednesday. Now, is that picking up the sound? There we go. That's better if I stand here. All right. As Andrew said, I'm Ingrid Thompson. I've spent the last 15 years working with people who are in their own business, so taking them, whether as an outsourced CFO, helping them with systems and processes, helping them to grow their business, helping some people to sell their business, helping a few people from not going into bankruptcy. The business journey is a pretty special one. And I love working with people who are in their own business. Prior to that, being in a corporate, I ended up being an accountant because I love numbers. I just love numbers and patterns, and I love solving problems. But I'd like to start tonight with a story about Chris Hadfield. Now, Chris Hadfield is a Canadian astronaut, and I'm totally inspired by him. So on a day when I feel like I just don't know what I'm doing with myself, I think about how Chris Hadfield achieved what he did. At the age of 10, Chris Hadfield watched Neil Armstrong walk on the moon. So in those days, and it's hard, no, there's a few people in the room that would remember this, but it's really hard to imagine, but there would have been one television in the town that he lived in, or a couple of televisions, and all the families gathered to watch Neil Armstrong walk on the moon, because this was such a momentous occasion. And Chris Hadfield was 10, and when he was walking back to his house, he looked up and he could see the moon, and he said, "I am going to be an astronaut." And from then on, he made decisions based on what would an astronaut do. So he tells the story of lying in bed one morning and wanting to just stay in bed, but he had to go and do his swimming practice. So he said to himself, what would an astronaut do? The astronaut would get out of bed and would go and do the swimming practice. Faced with a bowl of corn chips or his green vegetables, he said, what would an astronaut do? And he ate the green vegetables, despite the fact that he would have loved the corn chips. But that's pretty much how he spent his whole life. Now, Canada didn't even have a space centre or an astronaut program. And so he spoke French already, he learned English, he learned to swim, he learned to dive, he learned Russian because he knew eventually he would want to work on the Russian space station. So when the application came out to actually Canada said, can we have astronauts? He was one of 5,000 people who applied, and he gradually came down and there were 5 people chosen, and he was one of those 5. His story is amazing. If you have the chance to read his book, I would recommend it. So why am I inspired by all of Chris Hadfield's story? It's because he was prepared. He kept looking around for what else do I need to do in order to be an astronaut. And so when he became the astronaut, as I said, he learnt Russian because he knew the experience of working on the space station would need Russian in order for him to be considered. So he always put himself in a position of having the information. So I look at each of you, and you are all Chris Hadfields, because right now you are here tonight learning about what it will take to be in business. So you are to be applauded. So, when you think about, I mean that so entirely, because to be prepared to start a business, and that's why I wrote this book, So You Want to Start a Business, because over 15 years of working with people in business, I've seen the mistakes they've made, I've seen what they aren't prepared for, and so this book talks about what does it take to be in business. And I'm going to go through the 7 elements with you, and I'll put some stories in there as well, because I think stories is one of the best ways to actually understand something. So there are 7 aspects that I talk about. The first one is you. Who are you to be in business, or who are you to start a business? And, we're going to talk tonight about the different options you have of being in business for yourselves. The second aspect is, what is your idea? Now, it seems to me that the idea is optometry, but really, what is that idea? What more than optometry is that idea? I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. The third one is, who is your clients? Who are your patients? Who are your customers? So what do you need to know about them? The fourth is, what is your brand? And the brand is, what do you stand for? So who are you? What does this mean to you? And what do you stand for in your business? The fourth is the compliance, and some of that nitty-gritty stuff about compliance. The fifth one is about finances, and what does that take? The sixth one is about, I just had a little mental blank. Goodness. Sorry. The sixth one is your structure, and what is it that it takes to have your structure? And then the sixth one is your finances. Did I skip one? Goodness me. You, your idea, your clients, your brand, your structure, your finances, and then your marketing. So sorry, I got my numbers mixed up there a bit. So the 7th one is about your marketing and sales. So the first one I want to talk about is you. Who are you to start a business? So what does it take to actually do that? So just take a moment and think about, if you were to have your own business, what are the 2 words, and you can turn to the person beside you and say, what are the 2 words that describe what that would give you? What would be the benefits of having your own business? Just turn to the person beside you. just coming back. So what was something at this table? What was one of the words that you came up there? Freedom. Freedom. Anybody else have freedom? Can I have a show of hands for freedom? Yep. What else did you guys have? What was another word here? Independence. Independence. That's a little bit like freedom. Over this table over here, what was one of your words?
Makes you work harder.
Makes you work harder? Yeah? What does that mean?
So, I guess like you put your best. So, the best comes out in you.
The best comes out in you. It's really interesting you say that, which is why I asked you to say a little bit more about it. Because one of the things that I have found, particularly in health professionals, is how much starting your own business or having your own business is actually about being the very best health professional you can be. Now, I work a lot with dentists. About 5 years ago, I accidentally started working as a business coach for dentists. And they're a little bit, they're not unlike you in terms of very attention eye to detail. And they're very focused on being really fantastic dentists, but often, like a lot of other health professionals, don't actually know much about business, which is one of the reasons that coaching bodies like us exist. And one of the things that one of the first clients that I ever had was a woman called Dr. Sonia, and Dr. Sonia had been working in one of those massive corporate dental practices, and she didn't like the way she was being asked to work with patients. And so she decided she would like to buy her own practice. And so 3 years later, Dr. Sonia now has 3 practices and makes multiple 7-figure money out of those. She has dentists working in them. She works days across the different practices. And she said exactly that, is that she wanted to be the very best type of dentist that she could be. And her way of doing that was through having her own business. And that has given her freedom, independence, and it has allowed her to be the very best dentist and provide a standard of dentistry that lifts the whole profession. And that is a very honourable, and it's something that I hear a lot from health professionals, is this desire to lift the profession away from the way it has become. So, and having spoken to a number of optometry specialists and optometrists, is that this is a desire that you have as well, is to actually lift your profession and stand out from the mediocre. So when we think of the upside of being in business, what is the downside? So the flip side to freedom is that you actually have to work really hard. So being in business yourself can mean quite hard work. So the first few years, it can be really, and I know my colleague Kelvin will be talking to you about how he works with his clients, is it actually can be a lot harder work at the start. And then you get that wonderful freedom and the independence. So, it's this balancing act between being the business owner who has to work hard at the beginning to pay back the loan, to establish yourself in the area, but eventually it pays off. So some of the disciplines, some of the personal characteristics about you as a person to be in business, I have a podcast called So You Want to Start a Business, and I ask the question, what are the 3 characteristics that you need to be in your own business? And overwhelmingly, resilience, persistence, having a sense of humour, backing yourself, and being able to not be afraid of change and to be able to embrace difference. They're the sorts of things that come up. So when we talk about resilience, what do we mean by resilience? We mean eating healthy, having a good network of friends, having the sort of people around you who can inspire you, who can lift you to another level. I was just talking to somebody this morning who has spent a couple of days at a conference recently, and she said, oh man, it was just amazing to be with some of the leaders of our field, because that just makes me know where I want to go. So coming to events like this, sitting with people who are, doing what you are doing, going to conferences. I was just talking to Lily about a conference they hold and how it inspires people by being around people who are the best in their field. So how do you get that? So resilience is having knowledge, having understanding, coming to events like this. Persistence. So what happens the first time you try something and it doesn't work? We've got a gorgeous baby here who, right now, it doesn't know how to do things. You know, eventually she's going to learn to stand. Eventually she's going to learn to feed herself. You know, we stand up out of the chair and we walk away. We forget that it takes trial and error, trial and error, trial and error. And that's what happens in business as well, is that we learn from people around us, but we actually have the trial and error. You'll do something, it may not work the first time, but having a very strong level of persistence is one of the key characteristics. And having a sense of humour, being able to see the funny side when things don't go right, being able to see the funny side when things are going well, you know, being able to celebrate successes. So those are some of the characteristics of being in business. Being able to manage your time, being able to be really focused on when you're working on something. Because when you're actually in business, there will be multiple demands of running the business as well as actually being a practitioner. So getting that balance right. So who does some of that work for you? And so one of the characteristics is being able to outsource things, to being able to get other people to do things for you. Because if you are the business owner and you're answering the phone and you're doing the optometry, you know, there's a limit to how many plates you can spin or how many balls you can have in the air. So being able to delegate to other people is a really key characteristic. So when it comes to you, thinking about who you are, and that's my first chapter in the book, and I spend a lot of time, there's actually 15 questions that I ask people to consider when they're thinking about being in business for themselves. And so being able to answer those questions, they're those sorts of questions that I was just talking about there. So who are you, and do you have these characteristics? And you can learn every single one of them. And I know Calvin's going to talk about how you can actually learn to do the things that are being in business. Very few business people are actually just naturally born. Most people learn how to run a business in exactly the same way as you've learned to be an optometrist. So the second aspect is your idea. So your idea is optometry. Because some people, when they're getting into business, they're actually not quite sure what sort of business they want to get into. But even within optometry, what is your idea within optometry? Are you going to be a specialist? Are you going to have a particular aspect of optometry that you're interested in? So the idea can still have some room for you to be creative and to have more than just a standard business for optometry. So the third aspect is your client. Now, one of the things that I often, when I'm working with people, is people will say, everybody is my client, everybody is my patient. So who's your ideal patient? Everyone. Well, if all 23 million people in Australia came to your business, would you be able to look after everyone? If you live in a town that has 50,000 people, could you look after everyone? Maybe you can set up systems and processes to do that. But chances are not. So who would be your ideal patient? Who would be the ideal customer client to come to you? And then you start to communicate with that person. The reason it is so important to know who your ideal person is so that you can actually communicate with them. And so your marketing goes to them. Your website speaks to them. So if your ideal patient is somebody who's in their 50s, they're thinking about transiting away from the role that they currently work in, they have just had grandchildren, so you start to build up a picture of who that person is. Where do you think then, what sort of language are we going to use for them? What sort of advertising are we going to use? So being very clear about who your ideal client is gives a very clear message for how you do your marketing and sales, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So being really clear about who your ideal client is, I think about it a little bit like a garden. So if you have a garden and you plant flowers and you plant bushes because you want to attract butterflies, which particular flowers and trees and what else would you need to have in that garden in order to attract butterflies? You'd have to have some shady spots where they could rest from the sun. You'd need to have little puddles of water or little dishes of water so that they could have water. You would need to have the types of bushes or trees that they would lay their eggs in so that they could actually, propagate the caterpillars that will eat your garden. And that's the downside of attracting butterflies, isn't it? Is that they lay their eggs which become caterpillars. So it's always about how do we attract. And so when you have that ideal patient in mind, then you create a practice that actually will attract that. So then the fourth aspect is, so you've got your who are you, what's your idea, who's your client, and then the fourth is your brand. And this is something that is really important to think about, is why do you want to be in business? Why did you want to be an optometrist? And if you really dig back to how did you become an optometrist, what is it that you truly love about optometry? What do you love about working with your patients? So then that becomes part of your why and your story and your brand. Who are you? And if you look across all the different types of optometrists, they have a different way of presenting themselves, don't they? If you think about, let's move outside of optometry and think about brands that you know. What do they stand for? What are they? I was doing some work with, I work with a lot of Pilates instructors and yoga instructors, and there's a product called Mind Body, and Mind Body is an online booking system that tracks client notes, it takes payments, it's a whole, and their business started, it's an online software in the cloud, and their business started because they wanted to improve the health of individuals around the world. And so they felt by providing a software that would help people access all the different modalities of exercise and more, that they would be able to fulfill their purpose. So every time they're doing something, they ask themselves that question. What am I doing and how is this improving the health of the world? So that's their why. And so there's a terrific TED Talk, and the reference is in the book. You'll see it on whatever page it's on. It's a Simon Sinek TED Talk, and it's about why, all about why. So you have, what is the why? And that's so important as part of your brand, because then that infiltrates onto your website, it infiltrates onto your brochures, it infiltrates into your signage, how your practice looks when you walk into it. This is your brand. So if you want to be a brand that's considered first class, if you want to feel like you're the first class lounge of Qantas or Emirates, then how does your practice present itself so that it gives that message to your patients? And so they get that first class experience. Or maybe it's a different experience you want your patients to have. So you create a practice that gives that sense of a brand. Just come on in. You do this. Yeah, you can come and sit here, or there's there's a spot just there. Welcome. That's all right. So the next part is around, so number 5 is around your structure. Now, if you buy a practice, you will be talking to accountants and you will be talking to lawyers and you will be getting advice about structure. So what I usually say to people is that there's a couple of different types of structure. There's sole trader, there's a proprietary limited, there's trusts, and there may be more that suits your personal lifestyle and your personal finances. So it's really important to have the right advice around that. I certainly, I'm not qualified to give advice, and I certainly don't. All I would ever say to somebody is what suits you and what works for you. The other thing that comes under that is insurances and council restrictions and any of those other types of legalities that are around your business. And what sort of insurances do you have to have? What sort of registrations do you have to have? What sort of membership bodies do you need to be part of? And that's certainly the sorts of things, if you're buying a practice from somebody else, I think there's a spot, someone's coming to that one? Is there one just here? Yeah, there we go. There you go. So that's the sort of thing that when you're buying a practice, that the people that are helping you buy that practice will take you through as well. So it's always important to have legal advice and have your accountants involved. I remember some years ago working with I was running this program, So You Want to Start a Business, through one of the community colleges, and there was 3 young men who had been part of a recruitment company. And as part of that recruitment company, That business, it was very bespoke, it was a very small, and it was bought by one of the big guys. And they went to work for the big company and they hated it, absolutely hated it. So they said, we're going to start our own business. And I remember in the session, somebody asked a question, and because I had said it's a really good idea if the three of you guys are getting into business together, how do you set up that partnership? Is it a company? Do you know, what do you do? It's probably a good idea to talk to a lawyer. And someone on the other side of the room went, but lawyers are so expensive. Yeah, but you know what? Not talking to a lawyer would be even more expensive. You know, you can hear some pretty horror stories. You've probably heard them yourselves in the environment of what happens when people don't set up the legalities right. So, you know, if you're in a partnership, make sure that the terms and conditions are right, that the understanding. There's a fabulous, one of my episodes on my podcast is with a man called Adam Franklin, and he and his buddy from grade 1 at school have a business. It's Blue Wire Media, it's a social media business, and they had the Ds, death, divorce, dispute, and in fact it was all just written on an envelope to start with, but it's now a legality, they've put it together. But they've had a discussion about what happens if we have a disagreement. You know, what happens if one of us wants out? What happens if one of us gets married? Those are sorts of things to think about if you're setting up a partnership. So always really good to get the legalities. Okay, so then the finances. And this is one of my favourite areas because so many people don't do the maths. They just don't do the maths when it comes to actually setting up a business or buying a business or getting started in a business. Now, a business like yours has a lot of assets involved. You've got commercial leases, or you might want to buy the premises. You've got a lot of equipment involved that's very expensive, but there's ways of financing that so that, you know, that's all part of the expenses, it's part of the running costs, assets get depreciated. So it's critical to have somebody that knows what they're doing with the numbers, look at your numbers and do the numbers with you. And so if you are borrowing money, is it going to take 5 years or 10 years for that to pay back? An example I'll give, and it's not health related, but it's a coffee shop. I mean, I live in Enmore, and we've got this strip of 3 or 4 blocks, and every month somebody is moving in or moving out, and they come in with these big fit outs. We had an ice cream shop that was a complete disaster. It was a Greek style ice cream shop. It was all white and blue, and it was just completely wrong in Enmore. So thousands of dollars for a fit out, and 6 months later, gone. You know, the commercial lease, do you know it's actually harder to get out of a commercial lease than it is to get out of a marriage? You can get divorced easier than you can get out of a commercial lease. So, but coffee shops are such a good example because what happens is people go, oh, I like coffee. Maybe I should open a cafe. And how many of you seriously have seen cafes come and go in your area, either where you work or where you live? So what happens is they go, oh my gosh, this is an amazing business. It's $4 for a coffee and it only costs 26 cents to make a coffee. That's, what is it, $3.74 profit on every cup of coffee. Man, oh man, I'm going to have so much profit. But they don't consider that it's $1,000 a week rent. So if you're going to make coffees, how many coffees do you have to make just to pay the rent every single day? How many coffees do you have to pay your internet bill? How many coffees do you have to make or to sell in order to pay your staff, to pay back the fit out? So it's really, really important when you're getting started in a business to actually make sure that your finances are lined up. Now the reality is a business like yours is probably going to take, is it 5 years that we were talking, Kelvin? We were saying, yeah. So, and that's 5 years goes like that. You know, it is not a long period of time in a business. And one of the other things to think about when you're thinking about the finances is what are you going to do with this business when you're finished? What's your exit strategy? Because a lot of people don't give that any consideration. Now, for some people, an exit strategy might be to sell the business for big bucks. You know, we hear about the overnight success and the somebody coming along and offering millions of dollars for a business, and that's not unreasonable. You know, you could build a business and that you could actually sell for considerably more than you buy it for to start with. The other thing to think about is to think about, does this give you a lifestyle? You know, freedom and independence were the sorts of things that were given as the reasons to start a business. So having a business that at the end you sell But at the same time, it's given you this lifestyle to go to conferences, to be able to choose the days you work, to be able to choose the sorts of patients you work with, to be able to choose the people who work in your team, to be able to choose what your brand stands for. That's a very valuable it's not an asset, but it's a very valuable way to think about your business, that it's not giving you money necessarily, but it's giving you this priceless, to use the MasterCard expression, it's giving you this priceless existence that is more than that. So I think there's numbers of ways of thinking about the finances in your business, but a business has to make money to be a business. If you're not making money, you're not a business. If you're going backwards, you're not a business. It'll be a certain period of time, and you'll be closing the doors. So you have to make money to be in business. So that what make money means is break even. So you have to be able to make enough money to pay all your bills and pay yourself. So the first thing you need to do is to understand how much money you need. So one of the very first exercises I do with anyone who comes to work with me is say, I don't want to know what the answer is, but you need to know how much money you need to live. Is it $1,000 a week? Is it $2,000 a week? When you add up your mortgage, when you add up your children's school fees, when you add up your shoe shopping, all of those kinds of things, how much money do you need? And there's a whole list. There's 3 or 4 pages in a list in the book about all the different things that you need to think about in order to figure out how much money you need every week, every month, every year. That amount of money, plus how much it costs to run your business, is how much money you need to make. Then after that, there's profit. Even more. Is that my 10 minutes, Andrew? Is that my 10-minute mark?
Close.
Yeah, very close. I thought. So that's the finances part. And you can get experts to help you with that. If you don't understand it, get someone to help you. It's actually not that hard. You know what? The accountants have got this stuff. They just make it so much more complicated than it needs to be. You find someone who can explain it to you, and you will be able to understand it. If you can do optometry, you can understand the finances, let me tell you. So the last part I want to talk about is branding and selling. Now, if any of you feel squeamish about selling, now what does selling mean? Selling means helping people understand what they need, so needs and wants are different things, but helping people understand that what you do is something that they need for themselves. So anytime you can have an experience learning how to be elegant about selling is a very valuable experience for you. Has anyone been to the US? Has anybody just loved the service that you get in the US? They're selling to you all the time, aren't they? Whether it's in a cafe, whether it's at Gap, whether it's in a jewelry store, they just do it with such elegance, don't they? So next time you're on holidays in America, or at a conference, just go and experience and watch what they do. Listen to how they do it. And that's something that I would actually encourage you to do. Many years ago, when I worked at CSR, I was really fortunate because I was an accountant, management accountant. I was never a tax accountant, so I never really understood all of that. But management accounting is the idea of understanding how much the costs are. And so I was very fortunate to be in a Motorola project, which was a Six Sigma. It was in the very early days of Motorola and Six Sigma. And one of the things that they taught us, so the guys came out from Motorola and were showing us how to do process design and how to understand, systems and processes and protocols. And one of the things they said was steal shamelessly. So look around and steal shamelessly from other people's ideas. Not steal stuff, that's not what they're saying. They were saying steal concepts and ideas. So let me give you an example. So when we were working with the ready-mix guys, so the ready-mix is those big trucks that the concrete goes around, and you ring them up and you say, I want, concrete for my driveway, and they send out the truck and the truck delivers it and you pay them, and that's the steps of the transaction. So when we were working with them, and we had flip chart paper all the way around the room, all the different steps that they were doing in their process, they said to them, who else does what you do? And they went, the other guys, the ones with the green trucks. And it's like, no. Who else does what you do? You ring them up, you tell them what you want, they deliver it to you, and you pay them. Pizza Hut. And in those days, it was the 90s, they did it for free. If it was more than, 20 minutes or 15 minutes? Was it 20 minutes? If it was more than half an hour, it was free. So the ready-mix guys went, yeah, I don't think so. But you know what? It was exactly the same process. So they organised to take themselves down to Pizza Hut and understand how did Pizza Hut manage to guarantee that they could get it there on time, unless it was free, otherwise it was free. And so they learned that how do you take the order? How do you answer the phone? What are the systems and processes that go behind that that makes it simple? And so that is an example of steal shamelessly. So when you're out somewhere and you get exceptional customer service, then take notice of what they do. What is the language that they use that made it sound good? That's how to know more about selling and marketing. Now, marketing, you have to have a marketing plan. You have to know what you're going to do, because here's what happens if you don't. Somebody comes into the practice and they say, do you want to advertise on the side of the bus? Oh yeah, that sounds good. We'll have some of that. And they come in and they say, do you want to have a Facebook advertising campaign? Oh yeah, let's have some of that. And of course, nothing ever works because, or it never works as well as it could, because you're kind of lurching from one idea to another. And what I see happen is people do something for a month or two and then they don't do it anymore. It didn't work. You know, I'm working with a guy at the moment who has spent 3 months doing SEO. It's not working. SEO doesn't work in 3 months. It takes much, much longer than that. But how does that fit into the overall marketing strategy? So in the book, it talks about how to have a marketing plan. There's some templates there. So these guys, I know when Kelvin's talking to you, he'll be talking about how they support with that as well. So if you're going to have your own business, it's really important to have a marketing plan, to know what you want to achieve. It's going to take 5 years to pay back, so what's your 5-year marketing plan? Like, how's that going to work? How are you going to bring people in? There's 3 ways to grow your business in terms of clients. Is you can get new ones, you can bring new ones in, you can sell more of what you've got to the existing ones, or you can have new products. When you have patients that are coming in, you can either have new people coming in all the time, or you can reactivate the ones that have disappeared, and you can ask for referrals. You can get referrals. So there's numbers of ways that you can build that actually don't cost very much money. You do not have to spend thousands of dollars on SEO and Facebook, and you have to have a good website, you have to have a good booking system, and you need tons of systems and processes behind that supporting everything that you do, so that anyone could come in. I could come in and I could start answering the phone for you. I could come in and take a payment. I could come in and help somebody find the frames, because the systems are there, the processes are there. So running your own business is fantastic. I run my own business and I wouldn't have my life any other way. And in fact, I was just interviewing somebody today, and it's a future podcast, and at the end I said, if somebody came to you and said, I'm thinking about having my own business, what would you say? And she said, take the risk. She said, just do it. Because the biggest risk that you could, I'm just trying to think how she said it. She said, the biggest risk that could happen is you actually end up having a fantastic life. And I just thought that, I said, what? Just say that again. And she said, the biggest risk you could have is you could actually end up having the most fantastic life. So, you know, get the information, be Chris Hadfield, what do we call them, clones. Get yourself prepared. Being here is the first step of that. And I certainly wish every single one of you well in your journey of being a business owner. Thanks. Is there time for any questions?
We've got 5 minutes.
Oh, good. Are there any questions?
Who was the grill Ingrid?
That's a lot. I talk very fast. I just had a lot to say. I have so much more to say, but that's it. That's all I'm allowed to say. Ask me anything.
If you can't think of an answer, okay, we'll be able to.
Yeah, we could just catch up on the time now if there's no questions. I'll be around. Everybody will get a book. If you want me to sign it, I will sign it. And that would be, yeah, that would be nice. I really wish you well.
Ingrid,
Thank you.
again.
No, thank you.
Stephen Johnson is the CEO of Provision. Steve is from Melbourne, and in Melbourne he is known as a colourful media identity, which means that a lot of people talk about him and most of it never gets printed because they're afraid of what he will do to them. Steve has had a long career in a lot of very, very successful retail-oriented businesses and joined us, is it 6 years ago? 6 years ago. He still had a colour in his hair at that stage, which is, like me, I had a lot of hair when I started. And has, I think it would be fair to say, has transformed Provision into the organisation that you see today. And we're going to talk about Provision, iCare Plus and IQ a bit later on. But for now, Steve has been at the helm of an organisation which has helped a lot of people to change the way in which they go about their optometric practices. And the title we gave him tonight is What Makes a Great Practice? Things to look for if you're considering buying, and why not to start a greenfield. Please welcome Stephen Johnson.
Hey! Oh yeah, no, I reckon you'll hear me. Hello folks, how are we? Rightio. Who's heard me speak before? Rightio, I apologise. Because you're going to hear some of the same stuff over again, but hopefully because it's a good story and it's worth telling. So we actually to kick my little piece off, we actually did ask young optometrists like the people assembled in this room, what was important to you about independent practice? And so who participated in that survey, which was Louise McCarthy, who is Paul's lovely wife. So Paul McCarthy's sitting over there. Who participated in that survey for us? Because I think there was about 65 people or so that participated in that and came along to the dinner subsequently at Darling Harbour. So for you people, you've seen some of these slides. I'm going to go through them really quickly because it gave us some insight into the issues that you are telling us are on your minds when it comes to independent practice. So, Why do you want to be an independent? Why are you spending an evening with us tonight? Why would you want to get into independent practice and all the hassles that it brings with it? Why would you want to do that? So I absolutely agree with the Simon Sinek principle, Ingrid, of you have to define your why before you even take one step further. If you think it's just a good idea, you haven't thought it through far enough. You've got to work out what your why is. Okay? And once you've done that, then you start thinking about these sorts of things. So why would you want to be in independent practice in the first place? You told us, and I'm saying the collective you, because we had about 65 people tell us what that was, you wanted to build better relationships with your patients. You wanted to be able to use the full suite of optometric skills that you learnt at university. What's the point of going to uni for 5, 6, 7 years and then only using a fraction of what you learnt? Which, by the way, is common to virtually every degree that's ever put on this earth by a university. But at least in independent practice, you have the choice of applying which learning you want to apply. Professional and financial autonomy, the ability to specialise in a specific area of optometry rather than just doing refractions day in, day out, week in, week out, year in, year out. If you want to be a specialist, specialist is not the right term, if you want to have a special interest in contact lenses, you can. If you want to have a special interest in children's optometry, you can. When it comes to things like work-life balance, again, Ingrid said that, if you've got your own business, you have choices that you can make. But you know what? You don't necessarily get those choices from day one. You earn the right to make those choices. You have the opportunity of remuneration and profit. I can assure you that independent practice is still a very profitable place to be. And some of our best practitioners are making very, very, very healthy earnings. And they would be in the uppermost of all graduates in terms of what they're earning today. And establishing a name for yourself. Who's got an ego in this room? Anyone got an ego? Anyone other than Andrew? Make a name for yourself. Be good at something. Be known at being good for something is a really nice place to be, if that's what you're interested in. We then said, what are the main barriers? Why wouldn't you just go and do that tomorrow? That sounds like an easy enough thing to do. Why wouldn't you just go and do it tomorrow? Well, how many of you have had experience running a business? This is where the hands go up. Yep, a couple. The cost of the purchase. So how much is it going to cost me to buy that practice? Yeah? That's a daunting consideration, isn't it? Where am I going to get all that money from to buy that practice? Whether you're doing greenfields or you're buying an existing practice, there's a lot of dollars to be involved in that and invested. Are you worried about the competitors? Yeah, you should be, because that's a reality of life in any business. You're not in a vacuum. You have competitors. So you should be thinking about those things. The admin load associated with business ownership. Who's looking forward to that if they own their own practice? The admin. Who loves doing admin? Yeah, it's so exciting. Keeps you awake at night. Access to finance, and I know we've got Paul McKinley coming in via Skype later on. Time commitment to the practice. Like this takes effort, folks. Like if you talk to Paul, and Paul's going to tell you his story in a little while, You know, when you're starting your own business off, Paul, how many days a week are you working? 7 days a week. It's a big effort. How many days a week is he working now, Paul?
3 this week.
Yes! See? You earn the right. How many years did you have your own practice, Paul? 31 years. Now he's earned the right to actually, reap the rewards of all that labour. Can I tell you now, if you don't think it, because obviously in the survey you only thought it was worth 12 responses out of the 65 with staffing and HR issues, let me tell you, you own your own business, that goes up to number 1. People are the biggest issue in any business. Get the people right, your business is going to work. Get the people wrong, your business will be a nightmare. So get the people right. So it's interesting that from the outside, that's not what you see. From the outside, you think that must be the easy bit. Because I do all the hard work and all I need is a couple of people who do what I tell them to do, when I tell them to do it. Guess what? That doesn't happen today. And then the third thing, what would encourage you to take the step towards independent practice ownership, you need help in identifying a good opportunity. You need help in identifying the opportunities to buy into an established independent practice, so one that's already there. Financial advice and support, again, that's where someone like Paul McKinley from Optometry Finance can help. Being supported by a holistic business support network, that's where people like ourselves at Provision and IQ and iCare Plus can help. You should never be on your own in independent practice. It's a tough road to hoe without having some people that you can talk to who have specialist skills that you don't. I went to uni and got a business degree. My major is in marketing. Okay? I bring a different set of skills to the table than you do. I'm not here to teach you to be a better optometrist. I'm here to help you to be better business people. So being supported by a business support network like ourselves, like IQ and iCare Plus, means you aren't on your own. You get access to resources that's darn hard to access in and of your own right. And then the clinical and business support of a mentor optometrist, and Paul is in our world is alumni number 1. So Paul is one of the first mentors within the Provision organisation that will help young optometrists who work in a practice or own a practice to have somebody that they can talk to who's been there and done that. Wouldn't that be nice? You never have to feel like you're on your own. So folks, it's not a rhetorical question. What makes a great practice? A great practice. There are something like 3,000 practices in Australia, something like that, 3,000 practices in Australia. How many of them do you think are great? 10%? I reckon that's not a bad guess. 10%, 1 in 10 are great. There's probably 7 in 10 that they're good, and there's probably a couple that are really struggling. But if you want to be great, there are certain things that I believe are non-negotiable. And again, Ingrid has covered off some of these things already. So I won't dwell on the ones that she's already covered off. But to me, if you don't start with an inspirational vision for your business, then you won't attract good people to come and join you on that journey. Because if your vision is just to run an ordinary practice, then you'll attract ordinary people. And you'll attract ordinary customers. And you'll get ordinary support from your partners. But if you've got a vision that makes you stand out in the crowd, people come to that. People are attracted to that. They feel it. Everyone in this room has been into a business where you feel it's just not right. It's just not quite right. There's something off here. It's because all the people in the organisation don't share the same passion for the business. You can be passionate about business. Believe me, you can be passionate about business. The second ingredient that I think you need, and it follows on from the vision, is a fantastic culture. All the people in this room are working in a practice now, I assume. Who's working in a fantastic culture? Why is it a fantastic culture? Why is it a fantastic culture? Easy to get along with the other team members, yeah? Does everyone understand what they're there to do? Is everyone happy to come to work in the morning? Okay, so here's the exception. What about the other people? What about the other people working in practices where, you know what, you've got a team member who's not happy to be there. They're there because it's a job. They don't care about the vision. They don't care about what you're there trying to provide to your local community. They're there because it's a job. What's the culture feel like then? And what happens if you've got one bad person within an organisation? Typically, 65% of pro vision practices are sole practitioner with 4 staff out the front. Typical, 65, 2/3 of our practices, sole practitioner, 4 staff out the front. What happens if one of those 4 staff is a negative Nelly? What happens? What do the other 3 people in the practice out the front do? They sink to negative Nelly's level. If you don't get rid of negative Nelly and get in positive Peter, you know what? Oh no, that's pathetic. But anyway, you get my gist. You get my gist. The culture won't be right if you've got the wrong people. Okay? Really, really important. An amazing customer experience. So what do I reckon separates the 10% that are great from the rest? It's the patient experience. We call it the customer journey, and we talk about wow me. Every step of the patient journey, we need to find a way to make somebody go, wow, wasn't that good? I don't get that I know there is, I saw a Specsavers logo. I don't necessarily get that at other places, but I get that here. I get a wow experience from the moment I make contact with the practice, whether that's via the phone, whether it's email, whether it's via the internet, whether it's stepping in the front door. Every time I make a contact with that practice, they do something that makes me go, gee, that's nice, I feel special. What's the one word in the English language that makes all of us feel special? Our name. We have the great fortune in this industry that we know who's walking in the door before they even walk in the door. Just doing simple things like using the patient's name when they walk in and say, welcome back, Andrew, great to see you again, makes Andrew feel special. Simple things, folks. It doesn't have to cost money, it just takes effort. And then this one, Ingrid, I'm on your page, cash flow. Businesses go out of business not because they're not profitable, they go out of business because they run out of money. Anyone read the article? Is there any Georgia Matilda people in the room? Anyone read the article? I think it was in was it the Sydney Morning Herald on what day was it, Kelvy? I think it was yesterday or the day before. Anyone read that? Yeah. Just look it up in the Sydney Morning Herald from the other day about Georgia Matilda and where they're at with their cash flow, because that's their next challenge, is finding cash to keep that business actually running. It's the same no matter whether you're BHP or you're an independent practice that's turning over $500,000. You go out of business because you run out of money. So managing your cash flow and actually having a cash flow projection and being able to project when you need your money is really, really important to running a really successful business. So they're the 4 things that I've got to share with you. So guys, can you actually come and can you buy all that stuff and just start by buying another practice, or can you create it from scratch? You know what? Create it from scratch, you're up for 5 years of real pain. You can buy it, and then it's up to you whether or not you can manage it. So what do you look for, folks? First thing you look for is location. Okay? Location. World's your oyster, but it's up to you to find the pearls. There are great locations and there are not so great locations. So the viability of your location is really, really important. You look at the geography of it. You look at the demographics. So this is, again, repeating what Ingrid was talking about, your demographics. Who is it that you want to look after? Who's the competition? Because there'll always be competition. Doesn't matter if you're in a country town. I was in Narrabri 2 weeks ago. You know where Narrabri is? It's a long way away. People would drive 2 hours to Tamworth. Even though they've got a business in their own town, they'd drive 2 hours to Tamworth. Competition is everywhere. Shopping centre versus strip versus destination versus medical centre. Who would like to open a practice in a Westfield? Anyone? Anyone? Big call. You want to open a practice in a Westfield? The rents are horrendous. But you know what? You get what you pay for. Shopping centre brings traffic, foot traffic. Strip shopping centre, less traffic. Destination, less traffic. Medical centre, different clientele altogether. Yeah? So you really need to think that through. And then the premises. What do you do with the fit out? Do you want something that looks nice and sleek and modern? Or this is a real practice from, I think it's New York. Who wants that one? But you know what? That works for them. So you've got to understand what your target is and what you want to present in your location. And then, this is one of the big ones that we were talking about before. Do you lease it or do you buy it? A lot of people want to buy it because they want to own an asset. And with good reason, because property in Australia, of course, appreciates like very little else. But gee, that's a drain on your cash as well. The cash that you pay out for that asset is draining from the cash you're going to need to set up the business and get it operating in the early days. So that's where you need to understand cash flow. That's where you need to understand cash flow. And then you've got things like branding. You've got things like your target market, which Ingrid talked about before. You've got the professional advice of people like Optometry Finance and Partners Legal. And you've got OA, you've got Andrew there. At the very least, if you find yourself getting into, if you're not happy with the way things go, you'd want him to call you, wouldn't you, Andrew? Absolutely. Yeah, and then he'll pass them on to us, and then we'll be happy thereafter. Your ownership considerations, clinical versus retail. Who understands the retail piece? How many of you spent time in retail before you got into practicing as optometrists? So if you think about the typical business model in Australia in optometry, how much of your revenue comes from the clinical versus how much comes from the retail? Anyone know what the figure is? 20%. Yeah. So 20% clinical, 80% retail is the typical modus operandi of practices across Australia. And it doesn't vary a hell of a lot. It only varies depending upon the specialisation that you might have in something like behavioural or contact lenses. The equipment that you're going, how much do you think it costs to equip a practice, particularly if you're going to go greenfields? What do you think it costs to fit out a consult room with the technology that you're going to want to use today? Big chunk of money. The practice management system that you use to help run your business, the stock that you invest in, frames and contact lenses, etc. Who do you use as your supplier partners for lenses, for frames, for contact lenses? How do you analyse your performance and what do you know to look for? What's the benchmark? What does good look like? And your staff. So I'll come back to where I finished on one of the previous slides. If you don't get the staff right, like this mob here, versus getting people that are happy to be there and a part of the team and want to contribute. So how can we help? And it's not just us, it's how can iCare Plus, how can IQ help you as well? Well, in our case, we can help sellers and buyers, so people who want to sell practices. We've got 445 practices in Provision right now. And believe me, out of 445 practices, there's always practices for sale. They might not necessarily be on the market. Some are advertised, many are not. But out of 445 practices, as you'd expect, the distribution of ages through that network is that we've got plenty of people who are waiting for good buyers to come along. So we've got plenty of members looking to sell. We can assist with the documentation and the process. We've got qualified approach to practice valuations, because one of the things that I would encourage you to do is seek professional advice before you go and buy a business. Before you put your life on the line, get somebody to tell you whether or not it's a good deal. And that's something that Provision is happy to do. So we understand what the value of practices are today. We'll tell you whether we think you're paying over the odds or you're getting a good deal.
Is that only practices that are Provision practices, or you'll value any practice?
No, we'll value any practice. It's on the idea that if you go and acquire a practice, you'll come and join Provision. That's why we do it. Our associate program is exactly for the people in this room who think they might like to own a practice and want to access our advice and our expertise. So you can join as an associate, and we then link you up with an alumni like Paul, who will help you as a mentor because he's been there and he's done that. And so the case for Greenfields is, you know who this bloke is, don't you? Am I the only person who's looked at Lord of the Rings? That's Gollum. Do you know what he looked like before? That he looked like a normal bloke. That's what's going to happen to you if you get into Greenfields and you're just not thinking it through. But if you get it right, you're a lovely bloke. Like my mate Paul, love you. Paul, long-time member of Provision, very successful in his practice, and is a walking, talking example of what independent ownership can do for you. And I think Paul is going to follow me up here to the lectern, Andrew. So thanks for listening. I'd love to talk to you later on. If you've got any questions, we're here to help.
Let's say you want to buy a new existing practice.
An existing practice, yeah.
What's the return on investment? How many years do you look at in terms of your
times earnings before interest and tax for the practice. Your return on investment, I mean, these practices, if they're an established practice going well, don't have a risk profile like some other business. Like we were talking about coffee shops.
That's a high risk practice. What would that number be? Not greenfields. That's high risk.
No, that's high risk.
Yeah, not greenfields.
No, but that's the point. I wouldn't even give you a number on that.
Just got to see the numbers.
Can I contribute? We had our accountants do this exercise for us a few years ago, so the numbers are a bit out of date. And some of the practices are now worth more. Steve just said 3 or 4 times. I think for a really good practice, that's good, but I don't think that's an average practice. We work on 2 to 2.5 times in Sydney, 2.5, maybe 3 and a bit in rural areas. So given that there will be a discount on your return, for a Sydney practice, you'd be looking at a return of, you'd want to get your money back in 3 to 3.5 years. In order to, otherwise you're paying over the odds. There's just too much risk. Now,
And what if, my other question, let's say it takes you 4 years to, your numbers say 4 years and your lease ends in 2 years. Can you actually ask the landlord to go look to renegotiate, or will they just jack up your rent?
You should renegotiate before you buy the practice.
Now let's say you haven't bought it yet, but
That's the point. So
That's
one of
not-
the things you
you're allowed
want to have
to-
a conversation with the landlord before you get to the point of signing on the dotted line. Because if that landlord turns around after 2 years and
What's up
says,
your
no, worse than that, says, see you later, you've just paid for a business that's not going to give you a return at all. So that is one of the things that we would say. That's why you talk to somebody like Graham Schneider at Provision, who's one of my team members, to take you through those concerns. And even then, you don't want a lease that's for 4 years. You want to have some security that 4 years just gets you back to break even. Right? So you want some decent tenure.
our accountants would kill you if you did anything less than a 4+4.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, as Steve just said, there's no security in it. Without a lease, without premises, you don't have a business.
All right. Any other questions?
Going once, going twice. Steve, thanks very much. We're going very well for time. We're doing extremely well. My speakers are all very prompt, which is how I like them. Now, let me just close down this fabulous looking gentleman and reopen. Have I got a presentation for you, Paul? Have I got a presentation for you? Or you're just going to talk? All right. Let me give you a brief intro to Paul McCarthy. Before he vanished into the ether, Paul had a practice up at Drummoyne, which is about 5 minutes away from the association's office in Five Dock. So we got to know Paul fairly well, and we got to know him fairly well because, as Stephen alluded, he didn't particularly say this, but he was being a gentleman, Paul had one of the best practices that I've come across going around in Sydney. And you might think that's a bit odd, being in suburban Drummoyne, but we've got a guy sitting here who's in suburban Ramsgate, and I'd say to you that Ray Fortescue is one of the best optometrists in Sydney, in a suburban practice. You don't have to be in the centre of Sydney to excel. You need to excel wherever you are. And Paul's done that, Ray's done that, and there's plenty of other people who've done it as well. And we used to refer to Paul for all sorts of things. He was outstanding at Sports Vision, amongst a number of other things. So we used Paul as our resource, as an association, quite regularly. And then he decided that after 31 years, he needed to go and have a break, and Louise was talking about travelling. She now gets to drive around New South Wales. She's really excited about that. I don't think that's what she had in mind, mate, when she was talking about travelling. We've asked Paul tonight to talk about one of the other options, apart from going in and buying on your own, on your own account, buy it, and Paul walks out the door and says, "I'll see you in tomorrow." Mentoring you through, getting you through as a partner, as we've said here, meeting you halfway, bringing you in, and then working you into the practice so that there's more value to you long term. So that's what we've asked Paul to do. Please make him welcome.
Thanks, Andrew, for those kind words, and thanks for the invitation for asking me to speak tonight. Stephen's a very hard act to follow. I've listened to Stephen talk at numerous Provision meetings, and he's a fantastic speaker. So hard act to follow, Stephen, but I'll do my best. I thought tonight I'd sort of share my journey, coming from pretty much where you guys are this evening, as young optometrists, maybe thinking about the options of becoming an independent practice owner yourselves, through to me having purchased a practice way back when, and then fairly recently, as you've heard, selling my practice. So along the way, I've sort of picked up a few tips, and I've got some thoughts, and I thought I'd share that with you, because having been asked to be a mentor in the Provision Alumni Mentor Scheme, I think people like myself have got a fair bit of, street knowledge, street cred to try and pass on, and I love helping people. That's why I went into optometry. I love helping people, and I'm still doing that in a part-time locum fashion, but I love sharing my knowledge with people, and I'm really happy to be a mentor. Thanks, Stephen, for inviting me to be part of that, because I think all of us in my situation have learned a bit along the way, and we don't know everything. But I think we're happy to share that with you. So with that, I sort of thought I'd tell you about my story, and it's not all that unusual, but after uni finished in 81 for me, I started work as an optometrist in an independent practice. That at that stage was a practice that was a dispensing only practice. The optometrist I worked for bought it. He wasn't at that practice. There was only an optical dispenser there who had a bit of retail experience, but nothing much. So I was basically thrown in straight out of uni into essentially a brand new practice with no mentor in either a professional sense or a business sense. So I had to basically struggle on and just observe. And that was, I took my years straight out of uni as a continuation of my education, professionally in optometry, of course, but in a business sense, because I always knew that my ultimate goal was to become an independent optometrist and to work for myself. So observation was pretty much how I did it, and I didn't know the first thing about invoices, statements, receipts, adding all the finances up at the end of the day or any of that sort of stuff, and it was of course not computerised back then either. So it was a totally different ball game, and basically observation was the way I did it. My role was the optometrist, so I wasn't very much involved with the financial side of it, but I kept my eyes and my ears open. As Ingrid said, you suck in you steal the information, and basically that's what I tried to do. Why did I want to own my own practice? I guess my personality is not the type to want to work for a corporate. My personality is, if I'm going to work hard and put in, I would like to get the reward for that, both professionally but also financially. And as Stephen said, working for yourself in an independent practice can be exceptionally financially rewarding if you put all the steps in place, as well as being professionally rewarding. And so I wanted to get the benefit of that rather than my employer getting the benefit of that. And I guess I wanted to do things my way, but I really sort of didn't have the first clue about how to do that, to be honest. It was just in my mind that that's what I wanted to do. So how did I do this? So after about 3 years of working and seeing how that practice that I worked in functioned, I sort of felt a bit confident to think about branching out. So what did I do? Greenfields. I started hunting around Sydney for a place to open a practice. So I went everywhere. I went north, south, east and west, trying to find a premises. I was looking for a good socio-economic area, somewhere that had presentable premises, the potential to succeed, lack of competition, but as Stephen said, there's nowhere where there is no competition. So, and of course I needed somewhere that was going to have reasonable startup costs and reasonable rent and what have you. And as luck would have it, lo and behold, I didn't find anywhere. And probably, in hindsight, the best thing that could have happened to me. What I did start to do once I realised that wasn't going to be the option for me, I started just looking around for practices that were for sale, and no internet, of course. It was just the optometry newspapers that would come out and word of mouth and what have you. And I had a look around at a couple, and finally I found a practice at Drummoyne that at that stage was pretty much in its infancy. It was a probably 4 or 5 year old practice. The optometrist was also a tutor at the uni. He was there probably on a semi-part-time basis. His motivation for selling a practice was that he wanted a career change. And basically, it was for all and sundry a new practice. However, it did have a lot of advantages in that it was already fitted out, it already had the equipment, it had a smallish database of patients, it was in a good area, and so it ticked a lot of the boxes that I was looking for, but I didn't have to do all the work right from the start. And it was basically a walk-in, walk-out basis. So the optometrist had committed to university for his further studies, so it was me. And I consisted of the practice. There were no ancillary staff at all. So it was me. I was it. I was everything from the optometrist through to the person who cleaned the joint at night and anything in between. So you could say I was either brave or stupid or both. And in hindsight, I was probably both of those, I think. But I was young and I was confident in my own abilities, and I was hopeful, and so away I went. I could also see that it had a potential for growth, and that was really important. The existing financials of the practice weren't fabulous, but I knew it was a part-time practice. So, you know, it wasn't the ideal place. It also had competition. There was an OPSM across the road and an independent optometrist who'd been there prior to me. So it was, again, you know, it had its challenges, and I took those on. So how did I go about running the practice? Well, based on my limited knowledge, again, as Ingrid alluded to earlier, it was absolutely trial and error. I had no idea really what stock to buy for the practice, I knew the demographics, but I didn't really know, if you understand what I mean. I had to really purchase frames on a guessing basis. I didn't know how many frames to buy from each of the suppliers. I didn't know which suppliers to buy from. I didn't know anything much, to be honest. And so I had to learn by my mistakes. I had to learn how to budget and how to do all those sorts of things really by the seat of my pants, because I had no mentor. And in hindsight, it was challenging. And my priority really at that point was to fund everyone bar me. So I had to pay the rent, I had to pay my bank loan, the electricity, the phone bill, the suppliers. I was down the list a fair bit, and I was willing to cop that because my goal was the future. I was looking down the track. I was also fortunate in that I was still living at home, and I had a lot of support in that respect. But it wasn't easy financially, that's for sure. And building the practice was what I was aimed at, not an immediate return on my investment. So in hindsight, what would I probably do differently now if in that initial period? To be honest, I would probably look for a longer established practice. I'd probably look for a place that's got a greater database, longer financial history in terms of the accounting with the practice. A practice that has more information about the sort of frames and all those nitty-gritty sales aspect things that you need to know in a practice. You would, of course, expect to pay more for a practice like that. So, you know, you have your trade-off in that respect. And if possible, I'd also negotiate to perhaps have a phase-in, phase-out basis with the practice owner I'm buying the practice from, because of their knowledge bank and all that goes with that. And sort of act as a mentor in terms of the business side, but I think also importantly in terms of introducing you as the new face in the practice to the existing practice, to the existing patient base, because I think that's essential. I'll get back onto that shortly. And of course, all that depends on the circumstances, whether there's two practices, do the two optoms work together, does the other optometrist who's selling want to stay in, you know, and so on. So there's a lot to it, but I think the goal would be a phase-in, phase-out basis. So my experience in the early days was that there was no provision, iCare Plus, IQ, or the like. And so in terms of the business side of it, I had to go it alone. I think it's fair to say that the OA weren't focused on the business side of things. They were, looking at the members, but there wasn't a great business focus from the OA. And so, again, in those early years, I had to do it by myself, with all the buying, the practice admin, all those tasks that Stephen was talking about. And to be honest, there was a lot of time where I was doing lots of things, and there was a lot of time where I was doing nothing. Because it was pretty slow. Being a fledgling practice, I was a new bloke in town, and it was really quite challenging. In fact, I can recall one week where for 3 days I didn't see a patient, and I recall going home the first day and saying to my dad, he's always asking about how the practice was, and I said, didn't see anyone today. And he said, don't worry, you'll be right, you'll see someone. And second day, next day came along, how many did you see today? I didn't see anyone again today, and so I was down a bit lower. And same on the third day, gone from devastation to absolute dire straits. And of course, all you can think about in a case like that is the overheads. The bank loan still rolls on, the rent still rolls on, still got to pay the bills. And so it can be quite challenging in a case like that. And of course, I didn't have anyone else in the practice to talk about these sorts of things. It was just my father. And, that was pretty dire straits in those days. But I plugged away, and I made patient focus my focus. I wasn't obsessed about selling dozens of plus 050 spheres just to turn over the till. I was more inclined to sort of really care about the patients and try and look at the longer term goals that was. And that meant building relationships with patients right from the word go. And providing a professional service and a personal service, which is, I think, paramount for an independent practice. So away I went, and progressively I ended up having to put on a receptionist, and then I put on a dispenser as well as a receptionist, and then I put on an extra dispenser, and fortunately the tide turned, as with a lot of hard work and a lot of effort, not just through the 9 to 5, but the 7-day-a-week thing, with all that goes with running the business side of it, on top of the optometry side of it. And of course, things got better and better. I also moved into the area, became involved with sporting clubs, the schools, and I became more known. And all those little things, which you probably all can appreciate, all made a bit of a difference. And progressively, the practice built and built and built. But optometry and everything in life never stays the same. It's always changing. There's always new challenges. When I first started out in my first job, 1 hour glasses were the go. So there was this new bogeyman on the street called Vision Express or Optic Express, and they would turn over a pair of multifocals in an hour because, we thought the world had caved in. And all the way through my professional life, there's been challenges with new players on the horizon. The OPSMs were massive, and then of course Specsavers came in, and we all thought the world was caving in again. And competition's always been around, but as an independent, you sometimes feel like you're swimming a little bit against the tide. And consequently, I felt increasingly like I needed assistance with professional support to help manage the HR, the marketing, buying power and the like, financial advice and financial education. And I needed that professional backup, and 5 to go? Yep. So I joined Provision in 2007. And Provision provided a guiding hand approach, stimulating my ideas on the business side of things which I never really even thought about, with still the ability to run my practice in an independent way. It required a lot of self-evaluation and acknowledgement that I wasn't doing things as best as could be done, and being prepared to change. And I found their help invaluable in doing that. So the result of that was that I continued to build my practice with a personal strong rapport with patients, loyal patients. I'm not the best optometrist in Sydney by any means, but I had people coming to me from all over, and that was really, I guess, nice to know, but it was just due to hard work and building bridges and connecting with people, and that's important. But the support that Provision supplied me and the asset that I built, importantly, gave me something for the end of my professional independent career to perhaps have as an asset to sell. So my experience as a seller of a practice, a vendor, as Stephen and Andrew said, I needed a change after 31 years, and I had this, what I thought was an asset to sell, but did I have an asset to sell? Would I or could I sell? I had no idea. What was the practice worth? I had no idea. How do you evaluate that? Again, I had no idea. So I asked Andrew his advice, and he put me in touch with a valuer, and I asked Provision, and Graham Schneider from Provision came and it gave me advice, and at least I had a ballpark idea, because that was based on the practice financials, the position of the practice in the suburb, the location, the fit out, accessibility, all these factors that come into it. We agreed on a starting valuation. I was fortunate enough to secure a purchaser who, in my case, turned out to be an experienced optometrist. He'd had a couple of private practices himself out of Sydney, wanted to come back to Sydney. So he was not a younger optometrist like yourselves, but he'd been there and done that and purchased my practice. And I made myself available to him to use as part of a phasing in, phasing out process, which I've talked about previously. But he didn't take me up on that, and so it would end up being a walk-in, walk-out basis, surprisingly. So if I were you, what would I be looking for? What would I be thinking about if I was going to be looking at getting buying into an independent practice? And I think it's a very, very worthwhile consideration, firstly, to say that, both, as I said earlier, professionally and financially, as long as you make the correct choices. And there's lots of things to think about, as Stephen has said. You need to seek support in the early years from all those people that we've heard about previously. You know, the accountants, the lawyers, Provision IQ, iCare Plus, and so on. Because you need direction and you need advice. There's absolutely nothing surer than that. I think it is really important, if you can, to negotiate a phasing in process, both either financially, if you can, step it in bit by bit, but also to have the other optometrists perhaps be there in some form or another. And that'll, of course, depend on the optometrist. But what patients are going to see, they've built up a rapport with this optometrist that you're buying the practice from. It's like the GP or your hairdresser. You build these bridges, you know this yourself, and your optometrist is no different. And of course, the patients walk in and there's a new face there, and that's an immediate challenge for the patient. If the other optometrist is there to mentor you into the practice and introduce you, the new optometrist is going to care for your eyes from here on in. I'm stepping down. This type of thing, it's very, very beneficial for you. It might suit the optometrist too. Instead of just stopping, he can phase his way out of the workforce. So it can be mutually beneficial. So I think that's important. I think also continuing with ancillary staff, if they're the right staff, and that's important, as Stephen said, is really important too. The front of house is important because, again, the patient walks in and they see a friendly face. So those ancillary staff can mentor the patients as well as mentoring you with all their knowledge bank that they have as well. You definitely need to be prepared to put in the effort in the initial years, as we've heard previously. It's not all tea and bickies. It's hard work, but the rewards are there, and that's for sure if you put the effort in. You need to work at gaining the trust of your patients, and that's really up to you as a professional to do that. Patients will love you. Look at the long term. Don't look at the short term so much. Obviously, you've got bills to pay, but look at the long term because that's important, I feel. And always look at doing things better because you can always do better. There's no doubt that the effort you put in will determine the reward that you get at the end. And the knowledge base is important. So be prepared and accept the help that we as mentors might be able to give you. It's interesting, as my work now takes me around the countryside as a locum, at each practice I've worked at, and when I finished, I'd said, if you'd like me to give you any thoughts on the practice, let me know. I'm quite happy to, and I've got a lot I could tell them. Not one has asked me to do that so far, but you see things and you learn things along the way. And as I said, I don't know everything, but I've picked up a few things on the way. So I'm just about to kick off with the mentoring program with my first optometrist. I'm really looking forward to doing that. Embrace the journey if that's where you think you're going. Don't be scared to ask advice. Don't be scared to dive in. The rewards are great, and if you're the sort of person who doesn't want to be under the corporate umbrella, private practice has so many opportunities, both professionally and financially. It's really worth the effort. So good luck if that's where you're going, and happy to answer any questions if you've got anything that you'd like to ask me.
You're saying that the benefits of having your own practice is professional rewards and financial rewards. I understand the professional rewards in the sense that you can practice the way you want to practice, and that's a big plus, of course. But with the financial rewards, given that, say, optoms get paid okay if you're an employee, on average, is there a figure that's known that the average person who owns their own practice, how much more are they getting than, say, the average optometrist?
It probably depends on turnover and overheads and all those sorts of things. I don't know, there's probably an average. I don't know how much you could read into that. I think there's a lot of optometrists who are doing very well, and they're certainly doing better than the wage you'd be being paid as an employee. You can guarantee that. So yeah, I could definitely say it's well and truly more than that. Yeah. But
we might just hold questions just so we stick to time. Can I just say the top salary I'm seeing at the moment for an experienced optom is about $130,000 a year. Find me an accountant, a lawyer, a dentist, a private physio who would turn up to work for $130,000 a year, and I'd be astonished. In my view, optometry starts off pretty well and doesn't go very far after that, unless you're prepared to do what Paul and Ray and the others have done and put your backside out there a bit and go and get in your own practice. If you want to seriously earn money, you won't earn it as an employee. That's my experience in optometry. There's a ceiling, and it's very hard to get through that ceiling. A few do. I know a few who are doing significantly better than that, but they're rare. They really are. Would you thank Paul again? See if I can get. Sure.
That's directed to you, Andy. In your experience, you've been out there for a while. What percentage of optometrists who take the risk and go out there succeed, and what percentage don't succeed?
Ray, feeling?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Probably about 50-50, I would think.
Yeah, I would have said something around that.
If you put time. If you put the effort in, you'll succeed. Do the research, do the initial consideration.
Has it changed since the more corporate have been here? So have you seen that change?
I'm going to say to you that the change I have seen in practices that struggle are the ones who try to go head to head with Specsavers or Lux. If you try and do 2 for $198 because they're doing 2 for $199, I'll do 2 for $197 or $196 or $96. And when you run out of money and you close, they'll go back up again. Don't compete against them. Sorry, so that's a funny way of saying, yes, I have seen more who struggle, but they struggle because of their strategy, not because necessarily private practice is a hard place to be. It's a great place to be if you do it well. We might come back to that if we may. Kelvin, come on, make your way over here. Kelvin and I have known each other for quite a while, and we have a sensational relationship. We'll often do coffee. And I'm not going to say very much more than this is the guy I turn to when I want marketing ideas or that sort of thing. And he and I were the two people sitting at lunch who came up with this idea. So if you've had a great time tonight, he's half of the responsibility. So let me just see if we can get this slideshow going here, mate. Away you go. Meet Bailey, who's part of Kelvin. Kelvin Bartholomew's.
Good evening, everyone. You're probably wondering why I'm starting a presentation with a dog. Bailey is actually my rescue dog, who I've got recently, and Bailey suffers from severe separation anxiety. And unfortunately, because of that, whenever I leave the room, Bailey wets himself and cries. So yesterday, I didn't have anyone to practice my presentation, so I practiced with Bailey. And I finished, and I left the room, and my dilemma is that Bailey wet himself and cried. So my dilemma is, was it the presentation or was it the separation anxiety? But just in case it's a presentation, I have some tissues, and the toilets are over there. Some very interesting points coming out. Mine are going to be more micro when I get to them. Now, as soon as I find out how to use this. Just the green button, is it, Andrew?
That's it.
Beautiful.
Left and right arrows.
Thank you. As you can see, I'm really good technically. We're going... Why is it not...
Because
there we go.
Pointed at the laptop.
Oh, sorry, right. Thank you.
You got it now?
Yep, we're all good now. Thanks. A couple of macro points. The big one for me is that you've got, and I know it's been said, but I want to just talk about it a little bit more. If you were to start an optometry business, or you'd have one, you actually have two businesses. You have a retail business and you have a clinical business. And it's very important not to try and merge the two when you're looking at staffing and looking at the way you treat the patient at the time. That's why handovers are so important. For instance, you really don't want someone too flamboyant in the clinical side of things, do you? Or the patient's going to be wondering how good you are clinically. And you don't want someone too clinical when they're supposed to be choosing a really lovely frame. So you've really got to manage two areas, and that is what's so tricky about it, because you're not taught a lot of this when you're at optometry school, are you? The other big point I want to make, and this applies to all the businesses that I had too, I refuse to sell something to someone. And I often hear people say, I can't sell sunglasses as an optometrist, right? Who's asking you to? Your job as an owner, as an optometrist, is never to sell anything to anybody. You are there to listen to the person's needs, and that's what we don't do very well. Pick up on those needs, get to know them, and meet those needs. So clinically, if you do that, a sale will occur. However, you have not sold anything. Just as much when the person goes out the front, it might just be a fashion pair of sunglasses they want, but that's what they want or they need at the time. No one's being salesy. If your staff out the front are salesy, that person will have buyer's regret. Now, I'd like to tell you a little story. It's a biblical story. And this will apply to whether you're working as an optometrist or you own a practice. Now, back in the biblical times, there was a merchant and he had a large orange orchard. And he found out he was terminally ill. So he brought his sons together and he said to three boys, I'm going to leave you my fortune when I die, but I'm not going to tell you where it is. You will have to find it in the orange orchard. He'd passed away, and the boys started digging around the trees. It was a bloody big orchard, let me tell you. It took them 3 years of digging, and they didn't find anything. But do you know what happened? Those orange trees produced 4 times more oranges than they were doing before they started digging around them. And they all became millionaires. If you own a business, or even if you're working in a business, you have to be the best you can be every day as though you were going to sell that business tomorrow, or you were going to look at a performance review. So if you're working, it's just the same, right? If you're converting at 45%, trust me, when you get a performance review and ask for salary increase, and the business is in negative revenue because you're converting at 45%, it's not going to happen. So it is really important. I'm going to give you some tips as we go along, and they still apply if you're working for someone, on how to be the very best. The other thing is when people come and look at buying a business, they really only look at your last 12 months. They might ask for 3 years figures, but they want to know what you've done recently. They don't really care what you did 3 years ago. So, and you don't know what might happen too in that business. You could lose some key people. You could have an unfortunate event at home. You have to run that business as though you were going to sell it tomorrow. And I can't make that point more. And that's the difference between a good business and a great business. Now, just a couple of tips. And I'll go through these very quickly because of time. A big part, and we've spoken about it already, of being the best is to make that person feel special. So some of the little things that we coach people to do is to send a welcome letter. How many practices do that? These are all rhetorical questions, by the way. Not a lot. Why do you send them a welcome letter? Because they then feel special. It tells them how long the appointment's going to be. It tells them to bring in their glasses. Isn't that important? It tells them whether you bulk bill. It tells them where you are. And you email the letter to them. You don't post it. And guess what you get out of them? An email address. So you've got that without confronting them in any way, shape or form. And of course you don't just send a welcome letter, because if I'd been before, I would not be impressed if I got a welcome letter. You have a welcome back letter and a welcome letter. That's the first step. So it starts before they come in. The other thing is, when they come in, they need to be greeted personally, and Stephen's made that point. And you need to train your staff to make them feel special by doing things like coming around from behind the counter, offering them a cup of tea or coffee. You've got to do all the things that the others are not doing, and they're so easy to do. Handovers. That's one that we're not doing that well from my observations. For instance, and again it's rhetorical, how many of you as optoms are handing over out the front? Do I see some guilty faces? Now, certainly as a patient, I have a real issue with that, because my personal details, and for women over 40, trust me, they don't want anyone to know they've become a presbyope, right, are being discussed out in the open. You should be calling the dispenser into the room, and there's little tricks like having a 20-second button or a phone, or you can even put on the computer, and that way the dispenser knows to come in. It doesn't always work, but it's not a reason not to do something, right? If it works 70% of the time, because the other 30% of the time the dispensers are busy, that's okay. But don't not do it because you're worried it won't always work, right? Again, you have to make that person feel special, so they should be sitting down when you do the handover. You won't have as many walkouts if you do it this way. The other thing is, an optom, you have the trust of the patient. I hate to tell the dispensers in the room, if there's any, you don't. The optom has to hand that trust over in the room. You don't lose control of that patient, right? So handovers in the room is one of my biggest tips to you. For the optoms, and a lot of people think Gen Y these days, even if they're my age, right? They don't always want detail. If they want detail, they'll ask. And as optoms, we are guilty sometimes, because it's in our nature, of being detailed, right? So wherever possible, give bullet points and then say, would you like to know more? I'm going to skip the recall because that's important. I want to come back to it. Don't assume that the patient knows about the latest technology in optometry. It really isn't promoted very well. And just because we know it doesn't mean they know it. So you really do need to tell patients about extended focus, about anti-fatigue. They've not heard of it. They don't know about road lenses. Do you know that 20% of people, when we surveyed them, Provision had quite a large survey, did not know that they could have prescription sunglasses? 20%. And I bet we assume that they do know that. And of course, if they've got prescription sunglasses, they can claim it on their health benefits, can't they? But we don't talk about it. Recall. Here's another statistic from our survey. The second reason on the list as to why people came into a practice, 35% of people come in because the optom contacted them. Now, the old way is the letter. Nothing wrong with that, right? Do the letter. I've mentioned 3. If you go fishing with 1 hook, you tend to catch 1 type of fish. If you fish with 3 hooks of different type, you will catch 3 types of fish. So, you've got so many ways these days. Bulk texting costs 10 cents. There's nothing wrong with texting people to come in and have their eyes checked. It doesn't matter which order you do them in. However, it's probably better to do the bulk text because it's much cheaper. Eliminate those people, then send a letter. Now, quite a few practices are doing that very well. What they're not doing is the third one, phone recall. And you know what I always hear? I wouldn't like to get a phone call. If you don't do it, your patients on your database, and remember it costs 10 times more to get a new patient than it does to keep a patient, 10 times more in marketing dollars. They're watching TV and they're seeing an ad and it's called Specsavers. And it's going to influence them. And then they're seeing OPSM. You are losing your patients if you're not staying in contact with them. A patient generally, and we are using phone recall all over Provision, does not mind a call because you're not calling them to sell anything. And that's where you're getting it wrong quite often in your thinking, right? You're not selling them 12 bottles of wine. You're not a telesales marketer. The person calling is calling them for health reasons to come in and get their eyes checked. No one's telling them to buy glasses. We've got to get that thinking changed, okay? Sunglasses, this is my pet one at the moment, right? Because we have given away that whole market, literally, to the sunglass huts of this world. And you know why? Because we saw it as selling, because we saw it as fashion. Now, hopefully I'm correct in saying that there's no one in this room that doesn't believe it's clinically important for everybody to wear sunglasses when they go outside. Would that be correct? So why, as Optoms, are we not having that discussion and prescribing sunglasses for every patient where it is necessary? Is there anyone in this room as an Optom who can tell me that every patient they see on a daily basis, they have a sunglass chat with, even if they've come in for a licensing form, a red eye, or a foreign body? Can anyone say they've done that with all of those people? I have a question. Why not? You've just agreed with me that it's clinically important. When I see my doctor, my blood pressure gets taken, whether I go in for hay fever pills or whatever it may be, the flu, it's always taken because he's preventing a problem. We need to change our thinking. Sunglasses are a clinical necessity, right? It is not the dispenser's job to have that discussion until you've handed over and said, Mrs. Jones needs sunglasses, could you choose something fashionable? That's their job, right? Your job is to prescribe it. If you change that way of thinking, you'll be shocked what it'll do to your business. And we're trialling that in some practice at the moment in Provision. And we have been shocked. It's increased sunglass sales, by 300 to 400% where we've done it. Always leave 5 minutes at the end if you think that's an important discussion, right? Train your team to build rapport with the patient and get to know their needs. So this is more the dispensing side. But the big mistake we make is that we rush straight into the dispensing. So the classic way is, and I've seen it done and it's still done, is you hand over and the dispenser says, let's go and look at all these frames. Is that not what happens in most practices still? It's the worst way to dispense. Retail has proven that the more choice you give people, the less likely they will make a decision. They don't know a thing about frames generally, right? If they are some frames expert or they've really got a frame they like, they'll tell you. Until they do, you assume they know nothing. They are paying you, effectively, the person at the front, the stylist, the dispenser, to help them with that choice. So first of all, remember you've given control now, you've got control from the Optom across to dispenser. So you take them and you sit them down. And some of the big chains do this really well. You sit them at a table because you're going to have a chat and you're getting to know them. It's all about getting to know their needs. If you don't know their needs, how do you choose a frame? You ask a minimum of 5 questions. I've said I think 3 to 5 there, but I really like 5 questions because you'd be surprised. And you know what the first question should be? What is it that you'd like to change about your current frame? I've got a car that I love, and you know what? There's at least 3 things I'd like to change. So you lead the discussion. Good, better, best. I won't spend too much time on that, but the dispensers basically should only bring 3 frames over after they've realised what they need to do. So they will bring out, because you must acknowledge that not everybody can afford the Mercedes frame, right? So you bring out your good. I have to be careful using cars these days. Let's say a cheap car, a middle level car, and the Mercedes car, or whatever you want to call it, right? And never more than 3. Always odd numbers and not too much choice. And what you should do is assume always someone wants the best and talk to them about the best first, but acknowledging that they may want the others. That's basically what good, better, best is. Marketing. Interesting window displays. So I've just picked up 3 or 4 things, right? It's one of the worst things I've seen. I've come from retail, right? And I used to have a rule. I actually had a chain of cafes in it. I probably made the mistake with the first one, but I ended up with a lot of them. And I had a rule. I'd stand outside the cafes, and if 1 in 5 people didn't stop to look at the window, it used to go. It was out, right? How many optometry practices could say that 1 in 5 people stopped to look? Can I tell you, a supplier poster is not window merchandising. I've put their suppliers, but the suppliers who you support well, because window merchandising can cost $1,000 to $2,000, right? Will do a fabulous window for you, which is not to give you a poster and say, please hang it up, right? That's really not window merchandising. And it's the start of the experience for the person. So it's the same as if you're walking past a restaurant. If the windows are dirty, if it's not enticing, you're not likely to go in if there's a nice looking restaurant next to it. We take too much for granted with optometry practices. You've got to make it. The other thing is, the last thing quite often the person wants to see is rows and rows of glasses in the window. I'm sorry if your practices have those, but that's not window merchandising. They would much rather see something quirky, something cute, something very special. You notice that prohibition has now gone to signs in the windows rather than putting glasses or fashion in them. We're sending a message out. Why choose us is simply, and this is where people forget that you can take on the big corporates. You have to find what they're not good at, right? Everyone has an underbelly. So you have just 5 bullet points which you put on a little flyer, you put on your website, you can frame it from the practice, but what makes you different? Now there's an obvious one, quite often in independent practices. Paul's an example of that, and I think we had it on his. The number of years the optometrists have been in practice. Quite often, in fact, we've had some quirky ones where we've said 100 years experience from the team. But it opens people's eyes because quite often the chains do have teams that are not as experienced, right? The fact that you use the world's best Japanese, French or German lenses, if you don't tell them, they assume they're cheap and they've come from one of those other countries, right? So you've got to say those things. Tell them about your advantages. You know what? We keep everything in here. And very quickly, because Andrew's giving me the wind-up, little trick. Nothing we just don't do. Remember I said it's retail up the front. Put a 9 at the end of every price. Retinal images are not $40, they should be $49. And you know why? Because to the person, let's face it, when we work out the price of a retinal image, it's the return on investment on the retinal camera, which supposedly, right? So it's just a price we picked out. It's not like we put all these figures together to work it out. So there's nothing wrong with making it 49. You've just made 25% more money. And just like when people shop at David Jones, Myers or everything else, you will notice it's always $99, $199, $129. There is a reason for that. They're not stupid, but we're not following them. Remember, retail out the front, clinical in the back, right? Go and put a 9 on all of your lenses after you double them, all of your frames, and all of your services, and you've just paid for all your transport and parking for tonight. Put your age stock, don't treat it as old stock, right? Treat it as special too, because nobody, no matter how poor they are after coming into your practice, wants to feel they're buying something that's old. So make it special, put it in those supplier black boxes, call it promotional stock. Isn't that a lovely euphemism? Never be dishonest though. If they say what's promotional stock, you say what's a year old. But you don't lead with saying this is a year old, you probably want this because you can't afford anything else, right? Make them feel good. Those are just a few little tips to get you going. I've rattled them off very quickly. As you can see, I'm passionate about doing these things, and you'll be surprised if as an optom or as an owner you implement some of these, the difference it will make. Thank you very much for your time.
Right, here comes the technology part, and this is where the whole evening tends to fall over. We're going to do, Paul McKinley is our optometry finance guy, and he's in Perth, and we couldn't convince him to come over to Sydney for 15 minutes, so we're going to try this via Skype. Now, we did get this to work earlier on, so if it all falls over, we did get it to work. So just bear with me for a moment while I get Paul on the Skype. This is good. Paul, mate, I'm very well. Be nice to me. Be nice to me. You're talking to 40 people at the moment.
Always play nice, Andrew.
All right. Okay. Now, you still haven't fixed that desk thing.
No, I haven't. I've been a little busy.
That's good. I'm glad of that. All right. Now, okay. So bear with me. I'm going to talk about you for a moment. Paul McKinley runs Optometry Finance Australia. The association a few years ago decided that forming an alliance with somebody who could understand the business, and I say the business, your businesses, and understand what the needs of optometrists were, had the expertise and could add value, was a really important adjunct to membership. So through my colleague in WA, Tony Martella, we were introduced to Paul, and Paul's been with us, is it 3 years now?
A couple of years, yeah.
A couple of years.
We're heading towards 3, yeah.
And we've formed a really successful partnership, and Paul, I'm sure, will tell you about some of the success stories that he's been able to assist with. So one of the things we wanted to do tonight, because I know you're sitting here thinking, this is all fabulous, how am I going to get mum and dad to stump up their house to back up the finance to get this practice running? Not necessarily the case. Paul's going to talk to you about, I'm going to stand here and drive the thing, by the way, while Paul talks, but Paul's going to talk to you about what the options are in terms of financing. So he can hear it, clap loudly. Paul McKinley.
Thanks, Andrew, and good afternoon / good evening. It was only 5:30 across here in Perth, so thank you all for having me along. Andrew and I are going to try and coordinate this thing, as he so technically calls it, and see if we can get our little PowerPoint presentation going. We've got 15 minutes to run through what can sometimes be a fairly complex topic, so there's a lot to cover, but we're going to hone in on practice acquisition, and when we do commercial lending, for whatever reason, we always try and leave personal assets out of it, because if something goes wrong, you want to know that your personal assets are not going to hopefully get caught up in the mix if the bank wants to play nasty and to repossess things. So how are we going on those slides? I'm not sure if you've got those up. I'm not seeing anything at this end. But
sorry, no. We've just got your smiling face up there at the moment, mate.
Terrific. Great.
All right. We're on to overview.
I was laughing. Oh, now I'm actually really good. That's great.
Okay. Why is it? Just bear with me for a moment because it's not advancing.
That's okay. Whilst it's doing that, I'll keep ticking along with a quick snapshot of what we're about, and then we can catch up.
Okay. Now we've got you. We're on your overview. Background, why go it alone, etc.
Okay. Terrific. All right. So that's a quick snapshot on what we're going to run through. So a quick overview on Optometry Finance Australia. Important to consider why you might want to go it alone, as in be your own boss, which is a couple of presentation series that we've been giving to Optometry Australia around the country. I want to have a look at some the buying your own practice versus building it from scratch or a greenfield site and some of the pros and cons of that. Looking at some funding options around those, and then really hone in on buying into an existing practice, which really is the preferred way to go from a lender's perspective when we're looking to raise capital. We're going to look at some vendor finance if that's our last option, our last resort. They're going to run through a very quick and successful case study where we helped a young fellow buy into a practice in what was a somewhat trying purchase, but we got there in the end, and I'll touch on that just at the end to showcase some of the stuff that we could do. So, what slide have you got there now?
Who we are and what we do.
Okay, so who are we very quickly? So we're an independent finance broker. We're an advantage partner of Optometry Australia. We're a dedicated specialist finance broker there for the Optometry Association. So we look at practice purchase and fit outs. We do funding for motor vehicles and equipment, commercial and resident property for both private and commercial purposes. We can cover dealer sales, private sales. We're accredited with and or have access to over 35 national lenders, 3,500 loan products. And we extend our service offering not just to the members, but also the staff of the practitioner and the family of the staff, because we find that helps build loyalty and employee satisfaction. We give the service offering to them. That's terrific. And for my part, I'm the director of Optometry Finance Australia and also a chartered accountant. I think the next slide there is a panel of listing of all our lenders, or some of our lenders rather.
It is.
You've got there. Okay. So for us, as Andrew touched on previously, Optometry Australia had one lender, which was a large national lender. Might have started with A and finished with P, and might have had an M in the middle of it, so not wanting to name anybody. But they did residential home loans and that's it. We come along and said, well, we can do that and a little bit more. And so we got the gig. And as I said, we're a quick tailored lending solution for the optometrists, and it's a real value add. You guys are busy running your practices, don't necessarily want to get involved in, or have the time to do all the submissions to lenders. That's what we do, so we'll do all the work for you. All right, the buying or building, some of the pros and cons. So we refer to building a site from scratch as a greenfield site. Some of the advantages, you can make it your own. It can be much cheaper. Because you're not buying someone else's goodwill, and it's very rewarding building something from scratch and standing in your own culture and style upon it. However, some of the cons is that it's much harder to raise money for. Lenders get very nervous around this. It's an unknown quantity. There's no financials, there's no prior trade history, there's no prior lending history that a lender can look towards to ascertain that you're not a high risk. And the return on investment can take an awful lot longer as well. We've known practices start up from scratch where they're just hearing crickets for the first few months, waiting for the customers to walk in through the door. Let's contrast that with buying into a practice across to the next slide, Andrew. Some of the advantages or the pros to that, there's a proven track record, and this is what accountants and lenders like. We can look at prior year financial statements, we can look at the trading history, there's got a borrowing history, it's easy to borrow for, the future business is most likely known and is predictable. Subject to any nasties happening up in the career, we know what's happening in the next sort of few months, years to come. And then some of the disadvantages, Brad, is that you do have to pay for that goodwill. Goodwill is that intangible value for the future anticipated earnings practice, okay, which existing practitioners built up over a number of years. It's harder to implement your own culture and style. You might have a practice that moves sequent. If the practice has been in place for some 30 years, and it might be a little bit dated but very successful, and you might come in as the new practitioner, wanting to put your own style on it, your own culture, but that may be difficult to change. And the last big one is the ultimate departure of the current practitioner may eventually lead to loss of clientele, unless that can be very well. Okay, across to the next slide, buying an established practice. Some of the key considerations, if you've got that one up there, Andrew?
Yes, mate.
Okay, so the why and the when. You want to know really why you want to do it, okay? And so many businesses, not just in medical with a well-established, well-experienced practitioner, the lender was willing to take that punt, if you like, because he was very, very experienced and buying established, proven practices. Question about their culture of yours we've touched upon. Getting into some of the nitty-gritty from the lenders, what are they going to look at? They want to look at the prior financials, the trading history, the tax returns, make sure you get a proper business valuation, and then on that point, the multiples of the earnings which can affect the purchase price becomes very significant. Without getting into too much detail there, the multiple of 2.5 times bottom line as a figure goodwill versus say 4 times can quickly make a difference to some hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. One sticking point we've just come upon recently, and this is not a comp, is the retail component of the sales of the business can be a sticking point for lenders. I'll sharply contrast that with an ophthalmologist, where his is mainly consulting, and there's very, very little, obviously, retail components, so they're much more comfortable. But where you've got some 78% in this case of the turnover relating to the sale of glasses, that doesn't have as much appeal for a lender. Handover period is very important. Restraint and trade division for the outgoing petition becomes important, and the commercial lease will touch upon in a moment. Across to the next one as we bounce through these slides, as I said, but there's a lot to get through in a short period of time. Some of the key fund consideration then to look at really 3 components that a bank's going to consider. There's the stock, there's the fixtures and fittings, and there's the goodwill. The first two, the stock and the fixtures and fittings, or plant equipment, are easily quantifiable via a stock take and the fixed asset register respectively. It's the goodwill which becomes the fuzzy or the fluffy number, which is sometimes hard to pin down, and that's often the negotiable part of any practice purchase or the price. We've got lenders who will go out 100% of the goodwill, fund all of it. Some lenders are more conservative, they'll only go to about 90%. But I guess I'll underline this whole presentation by saying practice acquisition and the bank's decisions really is a case by case, and whether you're using Optometry Australia or another broker or doing it your own, the strength of the application and the likelihood of getting that approved stamp at the end of the submission really comes down to supporting documentation, the due diligence, the cash flow forecast, the projections, business plan, experience of the incoming, the experience of the outgoing, the prior lending experience that practices had with the lender, which all of this goes into it. And as I said, submission needs to be a strong, that right answer, without putting up mum or dad's house as collateral. The reason they look for mum or dad's house as collateral sometimes is if it's a weak application and they need something to back it up. So it goes pear-shaped down the track, and the bank starts losing its money. What can they repossess to pay out the debt? And that's why they look at that as collateral security. Okay.
Paul,
Then, yes.
you're just clipping a bit. You might just adjust your microphone.
Sorry about that. Let's try that. I'll try and hide that still. If that was me, I apologise. So fixed and variable interest rate options are available. Lenders will go out to 15 years of term, and this becomes quite negotiable. And we've had approvals regularly come through with a number of different options from the lenders, which is great because it gives the borrower some options to structure the loan and the repayments in line with their budgets. They will regularly amortise down to an agreed residual. So the residual, or often called balloon, is an amount that's payable at the end, right? And I'll touch on that as an example shortly. The benefit of that is that it keeps the repayments down lower. So you pay down a $500,000 purchase down to a 20% residual, which might be $100,000. At the end of that 5-year loan term, we'll then refinance that 100, or if you've got 100 available, you pay that out, the debt's finished, but typically we'll refinance that. And as I touch on, the lender may or may not want your parents' home, but not always. Some other considerations, things that will give the banks the comfort that it's looking for. And we're trying to, as I said, keep out personal property, mum and dad's property. The lender may call for a director's guarantee from the vendor himself, him or herself, which is limited purely to the debt limit. The lender may call for security over the practice, which is typically a first-ranking charge, or what's called a GSA, a General Security Agreement, which replaced what used to be called the fixed and floating charges. The lender is most definitely going to call for proof of your income and life protection. So income protection and life insurance. So if something happens to you, how do they get paid? And that's where the life insurance policy comes in and will invariably pay out the remaining debt for the banks left with a large debt on its hands. One of the last ones I'll touch upon quickly is if we're not able to get some funding approval from the banks, then quite often the help of the practice go through, and it might be a combination of bank finance and vendor finance. If a bank is only prepared to go to a certain level, the vendor, that is the practitioner who will sell the practice, he or she may step up to the plate and say, that's okay, I'll front up the cash for the other 40%, because the bank's going to lend us 60, but that's as far as it goes. The vendor may step into the equation, and they may fund part of the price. The interest is going to be usually at a slightly higher rate than what the banks will charge. It's critical to have a legal agreement drawn up, because in any partnerships, it's absolutely imperative you have a very strong and binding and crystal clear partnership legal agreement. And Peter Gandolfo with Partners Legal, if I put his name forward, he's also another advantage partner from Australia, very skilled in assisting with this. An upfront payment may be required from the vendor, then regular instalments to pay the loan down. The vendor is likely to look for security by way of business assets for the company or buyer's property. The vendor is going to protect his debt first against anything else, so it's a deed of priority, and the vendor is likely to limit the share of profits to the income practitioner until his or her debt is repaid. You're still getting a bit of noise back at that end?
It's just starting to clip again, but it's okay.
Yeah, okay, sorry about that if it's at this end. I'm not sure what else I can do. Just touching on a few other different loan types, and then we'll get into a little case study. There's numerous different types of loans. So we've touched on goodwill and practice purchase loans. They can be fixed or variable. Interest rate loans can be interest only, can be principal and interest, can be out to 15 years. As I've touched on, they will fund up to 100% of the purchase price, including the goodwill, which is handy. That's important because you don't tie up all of your cash. Sometimes we try and leave your own cash out of the equation if we can. Sometimes a lender will want a little bit of cash, or what they call hurt money, some skin in the game. But you want to keep that for your own purposes, and remembering that this debt, this borrowing is tax deductible debt, and therefore if you have to borrow money, make it for deductible debt. Make the tax office work for us, because you're going to claim this when you do your next tax return. Okay? And as I said, it really is case by case where the business model supports it and the sustainability of the practice supports it. Okay? Asset purchases, now we're talking plant equipment, we're talking motor vehicles, a little bit easier to do because there's something sold that the lender can come and repossess or recover if something goes wrong. We can usually fund 100% of that fairly comfortably, do out to 84 months or lower terms than that with residual, and they'll always be principal interest payments. And for commercial property, if they're owner occupied, we can fund 100% of those, which is really nice as well. Just to finish off with a nice little case study, if we can go across to that one, the slide of the three gentlemen there, is Andrew?
Yes, mate.
Okay, so this fellow's here. I've presented this little case study a couple of times. This fellow on the right, this young optometrist I met at a Provision conference up in Cairns, September 2016. Some of you may or may not know them, and I've got his okay to put this forward, so that's all clear. This deal took 12 minutes to put together and was settled in August 2017. Part of the problem was the absence of a commercial lease. If you don't have a commercial lease on your optometry practice, if you've only got 3 months remaining and you're about to get booted out beyond that, if you don't have premises, you don't have a practice. If you don't have practice and cash flow, you can't fund your debt payments. Lenders get nervous. They won't want to know about it. Okay, so we had to get involved with a little bit of lease negotiation on that, which is what the outgoing practitioner and the incoming got involved in. We're able to sort something out there. We managed to get a really good result. This young fellow bought 50% of the practice. We were presented from the lender, which was the fellow who was Trevor Moles, a big AQ specialist. We presented this application and we workshopped with a number of other lenders. They come back and said no. VOQS said yes. We come back to a few options. We had a 60-month term with a 50% residual. We also had a 3-year term with a 72% residual. Some of the lending, some of the approval conditions, and we were able to keep and there was no property to offer up here. That's really important, and why I use this case study. The incoming practitioner didn't have property to offer up as collateral, so we needed to look at other ways, and this is where we worked very closely with the lender to come up with a pretty good solution. So we had a first ranking charge over the borrower, we had a first ranking charge over the practice, there was a guarantee for the practice, and there was a limited guarantee from the existing practitioner, which was the fellow on the left. And he's staying on and had a really nice handover period of, I think it goes something like 10 years. There's provision for the incoming practitioner to buy the remaining 50% over a period. The lender also asked for proof of various life insurance, income protection insurance to protect their debt in the event when something happened to the young fella the way through. So that was a really, really nice little case study with a great result. A lot of work went into that one. Fella was so grateful. Made a terrific testimonial, so really pleased to sort of do that. And we want to be on call for this fellow as he continues to grow his practice. He has need for an OCT. If he comes to buy that $100,000 of savings in a few years' time, we want to be there to help with all of that. So that's the sort of stuff that we do. And across onto the final slide, Andrew, if I may.
Yes, mate.
It's just a little plug. So there's some contact points and material for us. So we're located across here in Perth. Look, for that, sort of 85% of the business we're writing for Optometry Australia is coming out of the East Coast. So the fact that we're across the other side of the country is not slowing us down. Email address, contact details there, website, Facebook. We've also got a YouTube channel which might be of interest to some of the people in the audience there. We've got 5 little videos there which talk about practice acquisition and partnership we have with Partners Legal. That we'll certainly look at, and a bunch of good sort of information there. The videos on why finance pre-approval makes sense, some of the advantages of getting your finance pre-approved first, some tips for buying from a motor vehicle from a dealer and from purchasing privately, and 5 reasons why using a mortgage broker makes sense. So that's in a nutshell, guys. I'm most conscious of the time, and I know you've got some more material and probably some drinks and what have you, and niggles afterwards, and some great networking. Happy to take any questions, anything sort of coming through. Otherwise, please feel free to email us, and happy to give you a call and have a chat at your convenience. And we'll certainly work within the time differences as well. So happy to call you guys after hours and a weekend. That's not sort of.
Paul, thanks very much. I could probably do 2 questions.
Having a part of it, really enjoyed it.
Mate, most welcome. Are there any questions for Paul right at the moment, or we've got the contact details there as well? Yes?
What's classified as a established practice? At least minimum 5 years, 6 years, where you can predict the cash flow, or is it like?
Paul, the question is, what qualifies as an established practice? Has it been there 5 years, 10 years?
Look, there's no firm, like lots of these things, there's no firm parameters around this or criteria for the bank. I'd say certainly 5 years. We've funded practices that have been going for 32 years, and that obviously demonstrates pretty good stability. But not all practitioners build it from scratch, from the age of 30 and then work through to retirement. So it's terrific. Now's the time to sell. Look, 30 plus years, 20 plus years, that's good, but we can get stuff through. That's been traded for 5 years. And typically, all we're looking to see from the practice is the financials for the last certainly 2 years, sometimes 3 years. And what's as important, as I touched on before, is the business plan, cash flow projections, where the opportunity sits. Because often you'll get a young practitioner come through and go, terrific, I can see so much opportunity here. I can see 5 schools in the neighbouring sort of 10-kilometre radius that haven't been spoken to, and we can go and take a really, really proactive approach and talk to them about, some early eye exams, for kids. And I've seen practitioners do some really good stuff in that area, and there's opportunities there. So that sort of thing gets factored into budgets and cash flows and business plans. It's that sort of intangible stuff that lenders like to hang their hat on because it gives them confidence as well. Did that answer the question?
Thanks, mate.
Excellent.
All right. We might stop there just because I'm conscious of time. Paul, thanks again for dialing in. I'll catch up with you shortly. Thank you, mate. All the best.
Thank you. Bye for now.
All right, now, let's get rid of, oops, no, go away. All right. All right, let me just turn Skype off, and he's gone. Okay. Thank you. We've got just 3 more things to finish up. You've heard from the guys from Provision during the evening, and Steve gave an overview of what Provision does, but as Steve has mentioned, there are a couple of other primary groups within the private practice support network in optometry that you really need to hear from and find out what they do. And then we're going to finish up with just a little bit from the young optoms who represent many of us in the room. Not us, not me. You. First, I'd like to welcome Phil Ross. Phil is with the Eye Care Plus group, which has been established for how long? Many years, 17 odd years. One of the earliest of the groups that works with independent optometry to try and make you better at what you do. Won't steal his thunder. Please welcome Philip Ross. Your presentation, my apologies. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks for inviting me, and thanks for the great presentations earlier on, everybody, Ingrid and the gentleman. I think they've said about everything you can about buying and selling practices. On that point, is anybody here wanting to sell a practice? So we're in a buyer market here, obviously, buyer audience. So just to start off a little bit about us, where we come from. 17 years ago we were founded, 100% owned by the members, and our board is made up of members, so shareholders. There are no other shareholders of Eye Care Plus than the optometrists who are members of Eye Care Plus. This is one of the reasons why we operate in a very democratic manner, our decisions and processes in the company. All practices independently owned and clinically focused. We see that as a great separator in the marketplace between the corporates and the independents in general, is the clinical focus, taking the time for the patient and allowing our practitioners to take time to specialise or special interests, I should say. Again, just underlining what I just said, so our members are encouraged to provide their own style of personalised patient service. We provide, like Provision and IQ, the purchasing, the marketing, the business support, the advertising support, what you need to successfully run your practice, and we deliver it at a level that suits you. We work on a system based around incentives and not on compulsion, so you can use us as much as you like or as little as you like. 3 membership options, branded, co-branded, and unbranded. The branded and co-branded practices have territory protection, so that's about 35,000 people, population in a circle around your practice, and that means when we get together and have our meetings around the country, the branded members that sit at these tables are never competing with each other directly. And so there's a very open sharing of knowledge and experiences going on there. Our membership fee structure is low cost. Again, this is underlined by the 100% ownership by the members. So we're designed by the members for the members. We have our loyalty bonuses and advertising incentives. You buy from our suppliers, you use our advertising, and we incentivise the use of that by giving you, to use a simple word, cashback, and that reduces your licence fee. Many of our members don't pay a licence fee because of this. This is just a collection of examples of what we do for our members in the marketing area. So everything from TV to radio, off the shelf to use, to top and tail. You change and personalise these. We've got, of course, patient letters, patient emails, the social media devices that you can use, various forms of advertising. One of the practices recently come on board there as a co-branded practice there. up in Gordon. So, succession planning. What is it? I think, as Paul said earlier, and I've said in my own life, I've sold 2 of my businesses, 12 years ago, the last one. Paul gave away a 31-year-old baby when he sold. And I think it's very important, everything that's being said here is that taking over an existing practice, a well-established practice, and a well-established practice is a practice that can provide you credible figures for at least the last 3 years, and they're good and healthy figures on which you can build to say, okay, I can fund this. And getting back the money on a purchase, let's say it's a 750k practice that does 150k in profit, and that's after your wage. Now, at the beginning, it's a standard wage until you've paid back your debt, and then, of course, your income increases by the amount of profit you have. But if you've got 150k, you're using a multiple of 3, you're buying a practice for 450k that you can pay off in 3 years. I think that's incredibly cheap. And if you then get the old owner like Paul was willing to do, and you saw how dejected he was when he wasn't allowed to transition his patients over to the new owner, if you work half part-time, you get Paul to work part-time, you use your other part-time to learn business, to learn to run the business. All of a sudden you've got for one optometrist wage between the old owner who's helping you transition those patients over into your good books, your goodwill. All of a sudden you've got a part-time job where you've got time to learn business on the side. He's helping you train your patients and keep the operations going for 3 years, possibly as a part-timer. You give him a contract, and all of a sudden your debt's paid off after 3 years. You take over as a full-time employee. Your wage has just doubled or tripled. Paul's off on a nice holiday. His contract's over, and you've got a successful business that's debt-free. Show me an industry where you can do that. I think optometry is really a great option to buy into. Given that you have the skills, as was said right at the beginning, are you the right person to be a self-employed person? Can you run staff? I've already mentioned it, up to 3 years, a lot of our owners, practices that I'm preparing for sale and helping our owners decide if they want to sell, part of that discussion is, are you prepared to mentor? Are you prepared to transition the young gun into the old business, introduce him to your patients, make him feel comfortable, make the patients feel comfortable? I think it's a great asset that you have there and shouldn't be squandered at all. As I said earlier, the brand, we have the co-branded and branded with the territory protection. You're not introducing the patient to a new name necessarily. The name, your name changes on the door, gets added to the door. If Paul's name's still there, the patient comes in, it's all the same. It's still the same place, so nothing's changed. So I think it's a very healthy way to transition a practice into new ownership. It's a very positive way to do it. Our system works in a cluster, so because of the branding that we have, we can cluster you. So the Sydney practice or the Newcastle practices or the Mid-North Coast practices, Melbourne, they work together in social media advertising, in radio or TV advertising, and they share those costs. And then, again, that can be top and tailed with locations listed. You see it from Specsavers, or you see it recently in the independent bottle shop advertisements. Hi, I'm Ray from Ramsgate, and I'm your local health professional in Ramsgate. You can imagine ads like that come up and just all of your group together. So it's a massive help rather than doing all the advertising by yourself. Again, where do you want to work? So have you considered, do you want to stay near family and stay in the metro area? Highly competitive, high rents, high staff turnover. Staff have a lot of options where to work. Or do you go regional? More profitable, less lease, more loyal staff, more loyal patients. Now, metro has its advantages, of course, higher foot traffic, but there's an argument to seriously consider going a bit regional when you're looking at a purchase. And in regional, more likely than not, you'll be able to buy the premises as well. And for every financing company being able to buy premises and or determine a future purchase of premise and get a favourable lease in place is a great way to start in business. You should, as you're preparing to be a new owner, you should be learning, reading articles about fashion, stock, digital marketing. You should be preparing yourself for the non-optometry side of business. And that's part of your preparation, should be that you're focusing on that. The treatment of eyes, the clinical side of it, you all do that well and you're learning that every day. But you've got to take time to prepare yourself for the other side of it. Very important. I think I've covered all my points. I'm within my time limit, I think. My number's there, my email's there. This is the ad we're using in the trade press. Please always get in touch if you want to discuss, if you want to know what we've currently got available for sale. If you've got if the money's burning a hole in your pocket, just give me a ring. I've got a couple of practices in Sydney and elsewhere. So, you know, we'd love to have you on board. We'd love to have the discussion. Give us a call. Thank you.
Because it's Phil Rose, not Phil Ross, as I said. My apologies, Phil. I don't know where that came from. Last of the groups tonight, but certainly by no means the least, is IQ. IQ is, as an organisation, a reasonably recent entrant, but the people behind IQ have been around for decades. They have tremendous experience and they've got a very, very solid team around them and behind them. So let's hear a bit more about this group. It's a little bit different. You'll hear from them. It's a little bit different to what the others do. Lily, are you going first or is Ray going first? Come on, okay. Ray, Lily, in case you hadn't figured that out. Yes.
Find our way around it. Thanks, Andrew. You're an IT whiz.
Rubbish. I'm a klutz. Right, here we are. Lily.
And to advance the slides, it's just the one there.
Or just press enter is what I'm doing.
Okay.
We're up.
Yay.
Well done. Thank you, everybody. Oops, nearly over. Some really great talks, and I really appreciate the fact that we've got a chance to share our story as well. And we're very lucky to have a team of people behind the profession, such as Andrew, Steve, Phil, and everyone else who's spoken, because we're all on the same page. We love to see you guys here, because you're here to try to make a difference to independent optometry. We want to see you continue on the legacy that we've all created. And as Andrew kindly suggested, I've been in it for decades, many decades. In fact, I was Paul's mentor, in fact. I taught him a few things in those early days. So IQ Optometrists, that's our more recent logo, and we're going to tell you a little bit about who we are. We're optometrist owned and led, as we said, and I'm an optometrist. Lily's an optometrist as well, as are our board, and most of the shareholders are also optometrists. Our goal is to support full scope of clinical optometry, and as I just suggested, to survive and thrive. At the moment, there's 16 corporate and there's 9 franchise associates, and we'll talk a bit about franchise later. Mostly New South Wales based, but we have got coverage in all mainland states. Our national office is in Botany, which is just around the corner, and I spend a bit of time there now, so I do 3 days a week in national office. I'm still doing 2 days a week clinically, and today was a long day, so that's why I got here a little bit late. So I know how you're all feeling. It's pretty exhausting at this time of the year. We have a training centre above the practice at Ramsgate Beach, which allows us to do on-site training, bringing people in. So what can we offer practice vendors? Now, as Phil's kindly asked, there's not many here tonight, in fact none. So, but the people who you're talking to, from our point of view, our offer really does lend ourselves to helping a practice vendor get that practice ready to help you guys take it on to the next step. So often the people that you'll talk to have got a lot of their things in their head. As Paul said, you know, the things that you learn, as we learned and developed our systems over the years, they've developed innately, and you've done it by observation, you've done it by your own experience. We've got Jeff Matthews over here too, very experienced practitioner who's done it the way we've done it. But the trouble is, and sometimes for you guys to go into a practice like that, is how do you get that message across? And that's difficult. And our goal is that we have systemised all our systems, and you don't have to ask the questions how to do it. Our goal is to allow our current vendors to have their weekends back. So what we're suggesting here is that they would become an IQ practice to make it easier for them to transfer to you guys at the next step. And exactly the same as iCare Plus and Provision, we encourage your own name. That's a critical part of our deal. We want you to push yourselves and be the Ray Fortescue, be the Paul Harvey who's making the story, because that's so important that they're not just coming to an IQ or a Provision or a Specsavers or whatever it might be. They're coming to you, and that's so critical because you do need to differentiate yourselves. So again, that's not rocket science. We've all the guys here tonight, or the people here tonight, have got the same story to tell. So what do we offer, again, further to offer to the practice vendors is that we are equal experts in eye care. That is our tagline. It sounds a little presumptuous, but that's what we profess to do. But that's what most independents will be doing. There's very few are out there saying we're the great retailer. We're all saying we're eye care providers. As we've talked already, 20% of our turnover has been dedicated to consultations. That, in fact, is going up because we're all tending to charge now for ancillary tests, and frame sales are dropping. So you tend to find that there's more of a tendency to see it going up more to 25% in current figures. So our ethos is holistic, personalised holistic eye care for all for life, which is our goal. And again, that should resonate with all you guys, because that's why you're here tonight. You're wanting to work out how to run your own practice, and this is the way you do it. Our back office does all the centrally managed stuff that you can imagine, so all those things that keep you back and being held back, working those 7 days a week that we did, doesn't have to be done anymore. You get that better work-life balance, which is a greater attraction for you guys. And we're not saying that Gen Ys don't want to work hard and 7 days a week, but from my experience, my son, my daughter, they're very happy to have a balanced life. So we are in fact a franchise, and franchise does have some bad connotations in some of the stories that you've heard around the traps with some of the big corporates. But we appeal to other optometrists. That's where we came up with our design. Our whole goal was to appeal to you guys, to appeal to me, to make sure that we were doing things that would feel satisfactory, in fact feel like you're going to home when you come to our club. So our club is the franchise where you play by the rules. There's clear operational parameters, but ultimately if you're not happy with what we do, then we let you go. We don't have anything to do with phone numbers, leases, website names. All those things are yours. So you exit without penalty. If we can't get it together after 90 days, then we let you go. So that's the beauty of our model. Our model is like an extended version of what happens with Provision and with iCare Plus, but we go to a much greater detail. So I'll throw to Lily now to share a bit more of our story. Thank you. Just so I don't take this.
So, as Ray explained, we are a franchise, but we're the independent style of franchise, and that sounds like a little bit confusing if you're thinking, well, it's a franchise. It does come under the Franchise Code of Conduct, but we have developed a model of a franchise that helps independent optometry, as Ray said, survive but thrive and be the best that you can be. As Ray already shared, you own your business, your patient database, your name, your lease, your phone number, always. Again, a little strange to talk about end of days at the start of a relationship, but if you exit, you still own all of those things, which is very unique in our franchise model compared to any other franchise models in our industry and in general. But we supplied that support to allow you to concentrate on being the experts in eye care that we all are. So we entered optometry because we have a passion to help people see better, look better. And we can't be experts in all the other side of the business side, and that's been discussed a lot tonight. So again, in our model, it's about providing all of that support. And that list is vast. And just to go through some of those things, it's just going through the support and teaching and providing you with things that you hadn't been shown at uni or as an employee. The back office functionality is huge, so that includes the payroll, accounts payable, HR, IT support, marketing, financials, And also benchmarking, so you can see what you should be striving for and how you are placed in your practice compared to others in the group. There's the collegiality and the mentoring from like-minded peers, but owning your future, so you're knowing that you're having that experience backing you all the way. There's still flexibility, absolutely, but with the proven systems. And the training takes on what you require from on-call assistance as well as standard programs as well as our national conference. And again, to follow on from the previous presentation on finance, we can provide funding assistance and advice. So again, as potential practice purchasers here tonight, YIQ concentrate on providing outstanding eye care for all your patients for life, and feel proud and satisfied with your career choice because patients are coming in to see you, not the latest offer. I want to end with a little bit of a story. So as Ray mentioned, obviously, I'm also an optometrist. I had, like a lot of optometrists do, aspirations and dreams to have my own practice, and for a number of reasons, partly because I'd spent a lot of time interstate at another a lot longer than I'd expected, that didn't come to fruition. But I'm excited that I get to help and assist a whole lot of optometrists realise their dreams. So in IQ, one of our early franchise associates to join the group, he joined Adrian Canali in Port Macquarie. One of the triggers for him to have his own practice, he said, was he turned 50 and he thought, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. And that was pretty exciting for him, and he's doing marvellously. A few months later, another franchise associate in our group, I went down to the launch at Bateman's Bay for Tony Island. And that launch happened to coincide with his 40th birthday. So here's another one that had a trigger birthday, 40, own practice now. As I was heading back the next day, I stopped in at our Nowra practice to catch up with Doug Grimson. Doug started with us as a cadet initially and then a graduate at the Nowra practice. And the reason I was stopping in to talk with him was he was looking at opening his own practice, and he did that in March. But I shared the story about Adrian 50, Tony 40, and he said, that's amazing, I'm about to turn 30. And I thought, here we go, we should just go out and target all the decade birthdays. But you don't have to wait until you're 30, 40 or 50. And there's another message that I wanted to share here tonight, because one of the things, we love our profession. I personally love our profession. We're in a terrific situation where we get to help people. But we also have the opportunity for career satisfaction to also own our own business. Now, there's been challenges in the past, and there'll be plenty of changes and challenges in our profession in the future, but you can't wait until it's perfect. And, sorry ladies, women have a tendency to wait until everything's perfect and they've ticked every box, especially too. So the one message I wanted to share, and in a really lovely way of synergistically, Ingrid's message at the end of her presentation today was just do it. Do it because you will really be excited and satisfied doing it.
Can I just one final thing, and this was just to support Provision and Eye Care Plus. You guys will need some support. I really encourage you to pick somebody to help you when you take this next step. And it'll be whatever suits you. There'll be a certain style of practice that will be more suited to Provision, another to Eye Care Plus, others who want the support of a franchise. But do whatever works, but make sure you talk to each one and help yourself make those decisions. But do it. 100% agree with Lily. It's the opportunity. Make sure that this type of optometry that we all aspire to continues, because that's what we've done for the last 100 years or so. We've been building it, and you guys have got the opportunity of continuing it. So I really want you to do that. So good luck. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Lily.
And it's always tough to be last, but fortunately we have a really dynamic young lady by the name of Wendy, who's going to talk to us just a little bit about what YO, the Young Optometrists, do. YO is just a sensational group if you're under 35 odd. I'm not there, can't win them all. But they just do so many great things for many of you, because I'm looking around the room thinking, yep, you'll all fit into that space. You're on, Wendy, come on up. Please make welcome Wendy from Yo.
Hi everyone, my name is Wendy and I'm the new subcommittee member for YO. If you haven't already heard of Young Optometrists, we're a group that we support optometry students and optometrists within their first 10 years of practice. Our aim is to assist optometrists so they can have the most positive start to their career. If you are considering starting your own practice, joining Young Optometrists is a great way to broaden your optometric skill set and expand your networking relationships. We have tailored hands-on workshops, CPD events and seminars throughout the year. As a YO member, you can attend these educational events at a specially discounted price. We also have exclusive member-free only events like our recent Christmas party. As we all know, networking and getting to know your fellow optometrists is an integral aspect of considering practice ownership. We run an annual and extremely popular official optometry networking event, which is a great way to form new connections and to meet new colleagues. We aren't just for young optometrists in their first 10 years of uni. We also have Froyo, which is a way for more experienced optoms that can be teed up with young optometrists in a mentor-mentee capacity. In addition, we also have a great social media presence, having launched our private Facebook forum for young optometrist members. As an optometrist, you may be potentially be opening your own practice. Our Facebook page is a safe place for you to ask any questions that you may have, like clinically related, business, or any other questions in general. We also have a great website, blog, and newsletter, which are all frequently updated, and we have a flourishing classified section with job ads and practice for sale details. Through this, we have been able to link many new graduates and optometrists to a practice of their own choice. So becoming a business owner and the journey this involves can be quite stressful. As young optometrists, we take mental health and the well-being of our optometrists quite seriously. We are a supportive group of optometrists who would love to help you in your journey to becoming a practice owner. So for your information, we have a Bali yoga trip coming up. So that's which is a well-being and mindfulness retreat aimed at helping optometrists unwind and relax. And Karina, did you want to have?
I won't be very long. I just wanted to personally invite. Oh, sorry. This is Pip, our mascot, platypus. Very cute. But yeah, it won't take long. I just wanted to personally invite you all to the Bali retreat. Essentially, all of you are here because you figure out what you want to do with life. Should I open up a practice? Should I own my own practice? Or is that really for me? And I guess this retreat is just kind of to relax, recharge, and refocus. And we'll go through workshops and things to figure out life together if you're interested. Yeah, that's all.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening. I'm just going to do it.
Make sure your travel insurance covers volcanoes. Seriously, there's a whole lot of people sitting in Denpasar Airport whose travel insurance doesn't cover volcanoes. Look, thank you for coming along tonight. I really do appreciate the fact that you've stayed the distance because finishing at 9:30 is no fun. I hope you've enjoyed it. The association has really enjoyed bringing it to you. I wasn't kidding when I said Kelvin and I were sitting over coffee and we came up with this silly idea and it seems to have worked. We're going to email out to each of you after tonight just to ask you for your thoughts, and we'd really appreciate it because it's the first time we've done something in this format. We've kind of played around with it a little bit otherwise, but we haven't quite done it this way, so we'd really like to know what you thought about the speakers and what was valuable and what could be improved. Just remember, as you work your way through your careers, the association is there to look after you. That's the only reason we get up in the morning, is to make sure that your day is better than your day yesterday. So if you need anything, want anything, need help with anything, don't get any complaints against you. That's my bane at the moment. We're dealing with that. But if you do, give us a call. We'll help you out. Thank you for coming along. I really hope you've enjoyed it. Safe travels. And we will see you, we won't see you before Christmas, I don't think. I think that's about it from us. Have a fantastic Christmas. We'll see you in the new year. We will see you at Super Sunday, Luna Park on the 11th of March next year. Enjoy yourselves. Thank you very much.